Hello and welcome one more time to one of my videos, and this one will be pretty special because in the session we will have astrologers and psychologists, and we also have people who benefited from both professions. So that will be pretty inspiring to talk about these things, and we will talk about how and where astrology and psychology meet. And I'm so excited for this video for a couple of days, and I welcome all of my participants and I will introduce them one by one before we start. So thank you for being here. So welcome. And in this video, we have a special guest, Frida, and she is doing PhD in psychology. And also she's a professional astrologer and she's combining her work and her academic background in her profession. So welcome, Frida.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah. And then we have the psychologist who is the mind behind this session. He inspired me to do this session with psychologists and astrologers. And here we have Daniel, who's a professional psychologist.
Thank you so much, Matt. Really glad to be here.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have the astrologers, and you know Jasmina already. Welcome, Jasmina.
Welcome. Nice to be here. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And then we have Lauren.
Hey everyone, I'm up in Boston, Massachusetts. I launched my brand in February, but I've been an avid astrology student for years.
Yeah, exactly. I will also share how people can contact you if they want to. And welcome, Marc. Also, he's one of my students. Hello.
Hello,
And
everyone.
I think, hello, he will have lots of amazing insight into this topic. And welcome, Jaymie. She's also a professional astrologer, and she joined us, thankfully.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I have heavy Scorpio and 8th house placements and lots of psychologist clients, so it's definitely an interest of mine. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome. So it's great that you are here. And we also have valuable input. We will also have valuable input from the participants who have experience in both astrology and psychology. And so they will share their experience and how they benefited from both professions. And I think their contribution is pretty valuable as well. So we are here for people to benefit from or learn from these two professions. So we have Mia first. Yeah, hello, Mia.
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And we have Melina.
Hello.
Hello,
Nice
Melina.
to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And we have Nick. Welcome,
Hi,
Nick.
everyone.
Hi. Okay, so we are good to go. So these are the professionals and participants, and we also kind of overlap each other in some points. So in both professions. So let me start with Frida firstly.
Yeah.
Why? Because she specializes in both fields. So for that, Frida, yeah, can you first, you can just introduce yourself first and then talk about your professions and academic background and so on. Yes.
Yeah, sure. I'm Frida. I'm located in Sweden. I have a Taurus sun, Scorpio moon, and Sagittarius ascendant. I think some of us here, we tend to have heavy Scorpio energy, perhaps. Some of us. I tend to channel my Scorpio moon into psychology and like digging deep into stuff. Just like Matt said, I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm also doing a PhD in psychology right now. And I've been into astrology since 2011. I was first introduced by an old partner of mine who used astrology as a way to understand life. So that was my first encounter in 2011. And from there, I began studying and just went deeper into it. And but I have to say that it has taken me quite a lot of years to integrate my astrological practice with my identity as a psychologist. And this is because in Sweden, where I'm at, it's very taboo. It's very wrong for people to practice astrology when they have, for example, an academic background and they have a license to practice psychotherapy, or they're licensed psychologists like I was. So it's been kind of difficult from my perspective because I started studying to become a psychologist in 2013. So I found astrology 2 years prior to that, and then I decided to become a psychologist. So I always had astrology with me, like in the background under the surface. And sometimes I even joke about it, and I say that it's taken me a lot of courage to like come out as an astrologer in this country, because so many times have I been asked like, oh, but you know what could happen to you if somebody found out that you're also practicing astrology on the side? You know, that's not allowed, because in Sweden is so rigid about what we're allowed to do. Like, for example, also certain psychotherapeutic methods, such as certain psychodynamic methods, are not allowed here. Because they are so rigid when it comes to scientific evidence-based methods. And it's almost to the point where I call it scientism, the belief that only science is valuable. And I think that's crazy. So I'm a little bit of an advocate for the integration, and yeah, it was easier for me to go into astrology and be more open about it as I left the clinical world in 2020 and started pursuing my my PhD studies, which I'm at the end of now. So next year I will graduate from the doctoral program and be a doctor in psychology. And basically, just to summarize this, like what I think about is that for me, I'm very interested in the questions about how do we combine these practices. And I'm sure that what the future holds is that we're going towards an integration, that we're seeing more and more people becoming interested in astrology or tarot or symbolism. There's always also an interest in, for example, parapsychology, or what you call it also, the use of psychedelics in therapeutic settings. There's a huge interest that's growing. It's just that I think a lot of these integrative methods, or like when you try to combine these methods and bridge the gap between science and esotericism, for example, has been so taboo where I'm at, and I think we're beginning to see the end of that. And on that theme also, it's actually like a huge question for me, as you can all understand, because I've been silenced for a lot of years, even to the point where I, a while ago, decided to write the Swedish authorities here, and have my psychological license, my therapeutic license, revoked or taken back. So at the moment, I don't have a psychological license in this country, because I think that I don't want to go back to the clinical world of working in the psychiatry and those kind of fields. Instead, I want to be working in the astrological, in the like intersection between therapy and astrology, by combining positive psychology and the strengthening perspective of psychology with modern astrology. So that's a little bit about me, and I've even written a book about this that's coming out next year. So it's a really, really like passionate subject for me. That's to summarize it all very briefly.
Okay, that's perfect. That's I'm so amazed by this. And can you also talk about a little bit of your book? So what is it about, the title?
Yes, my book is basically about, first of all, it's part of the book is about my journey with astrology as a therapist, psychologist, how it's been for me. And I talk a little bit about also things as, okay, why have we had this very polarized perspective in the Western world, for example, in Sweden, where I'm at? Why do we have this polarization between evidence-based and everything else? And why do we think that that is charlatanism and those kind of things? You know, I try to bridge the gap and just create discussion. And the rest of the book is basically that I take the symbolism of the planets according to modern astrology, and I try to mirror them to show that there is a similarity to modern evidence-based psychological concepts from positive psychology. For example, I bridge Uranus with authenticity, because we have done a lot of research on authenticity and the importance of that, and daring to like walk our own path and being true to ourselves in that sense. So I just try to show people that, look, we don't have to legitimize astrology through science. You know, we can just let it be as it is. It's great as it is, but there are similarities always between the astrological practice and, for example, evidence-based methods. or astrology and, I don't know, narrative therapy. There are so many bridges that we can see. It's just that they are not being recognized by authorities where I'm at. So that's basically my book, and it's in English, so everyone will be able to read.
Perfect. Like I will definitely buy that. So you should share us the link, like and everything is ready. I'm so exact for the book. So I'm sure that will be pretty interesting to read. So
Yeah.
yeah. So thank you for the input. And yeah, you talked about really relevant things. So even though like Sweden might be more strict in the laws and legal definitions, but we also have this problem all over the world. So like astrology has become more mainstream, especially since lockdowns, since COVID lockdowns. And people now know aspects, houses, like signs, planets, like every terminology related to astrology. But still, like in society, like in general, sometimes like people might be like, so what? Like it's kind of charlatanism. And as you said, exactly. And for this one, like when you were a clinical psychologist, have you ever checked someone's birthday, or have you ever talked about astrology with your clients? And have you ever had the chance, or you
No.
the strict laws? Yeah, you could
No,
not.
I haven't. It's interesting though, what I heard. Sorry, I forgot your name, but with the Scorpio stellium, I remember I heard you had a lot of psychologists as clients, and that's something that I've experienced as well. That the clients that tend to be attracted to my practice are perhaps medical doctors or psychologists or people who are so curious, but because of the stigma or because of like taboos and these kind of things, they're not sure how to approach astrology, and they like to perhaps come to me and see that, oh, it's not so weird as I thought. That's nice. But on this theme is also, and this is also covered in my book, but I think one of the main discussions we ought to have as therapists, astrologers, psychologists, is the discussion around ethics. Because from my point of view, I think that's what people have been so concerned about when they hear that I practice astrology as an academic or as a psychologist, you know, because they tend to think that, okay, then my main focus in my astrological practice will be to try to diagnose people with psychopathology based off astrology. And that's exactly not what I'm doing, like quite opposite, because the way I see this is that, I mean, a lot of the diagnoses we have, they are like, it's symptom based, right? And it's more of an indication of, okay, this person falls out of the norms of society based on their functionality and the way they are. And I don't want to use astrology to kind of say, oh, yes, you do fall out of the norms. Because my way of practicing astrology is more about inclusion and acceptance, empowerment. So I want to rather use astrology as a way to say, like from an empowering perspective based of positive psychology, how can we strengthen you? And we don't care about the diagnosis, because that's not, and that's been my way of like handling this dilemma, because then I've been able to say to myself, oh, but the psychologist role of Frida is the one that used to work in the psychiatry and used to do the neuropsychological assessments and those kind of things. And the astrologer is the person that works with astrology from a strengthening perspective. And there I kind of combine my PhD studies, because there I study also positive psychology in my PhD. So to trying to navigate a lot, as you can hear.
Yeah, perfect.
And I think that's really good, and I think that's really important, because just listening to you, I'm Japanese Korean, and in Asia, it's one of the most spiritual cultures and stuff, very mystical, but we're also the most scientifically advanced. And so in Japan, there are mainstream studies in science that actually study and prove the existence of the paranormal, and there's more evidence based of that than there is of gravity and stuff like that. So there is a lot of legitimacy, but there's taboos around it that people don't realize. And I agree with everything that you said, Frida. I think it's amazing. And it's very much this thing where, like, it is really important for the astrologer to have the right mindset, Because if you have information and you're thinking about things from the perspective of like, here are the problems, that's not really going to help the clients. You know, like my perspective and the way that I've used astrology is recognizing like, okay, like each of us have a method of processing trauma that's the most compatible. And for me, I've had a background, I was an early ADHD diagnosis, which is unheard of. And I went through so many treatment plans, medically, holistically, and I realized that I wasn't making progress because I wasn't using methods that were best for me. And so for me, I feel like astrology is a way to, as like a stepping ladder of like, here are the ways that are best going to support you. Here are some challenges to be able to save people time, money, and energy so that they don't get discouraged. Because like with anything, psychology is amazing, but if you use a method that's not designed for you, it can exacerbate situations, and there are just more custom tailored way. And that's where I feel like astrology is really beautiful. Rather than putting someone in a box, it's like, you know, here are some choices, here are some options, here are the reasons why these are best suited, so that people can also assess from themselves. They're not just taking what we're saying as astrologers or psychologists, but being empowered to be able to like determine like, yes, that resonates, yes, that does, no, that doesn't. And I feel like that really is like, I like the idea of empowering people so that they can use their chart so that it's useful for them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you so much.
And I mean, that does require flexibility. Like I always say, it requires flexibility. And that's what's so interesting and so funny sometimes, that the skeptics or the people who tend to criticize astrology, they seem to think that as astrologers, we are not flexible, that we say, this means that, and that we are very like, how to say, deterministic in our understanding of certain things. And it's so funny sometimes for me, because when I look at the people who are like these, they're very, very, it's like science is their religion, right? They are rigid as well. Like that's why I say that flexibility, we need that in so many, whatever we pursue in life, right? Whether it be astrology or psychology or science, whatever, like the possibility to take a step back and be like, how is this working? Or could we do something else? Or how can we understand this? So it doesn't matter what we practice, like if we become rigid, I think that's when we, fall on our own sword, or whatever you say.
It's so funny because there's so many branches and philosophies of astrology that it's like you really can't be rigid, because as an astrologer, like we're all obsessed with always learning new things anyways. And it's like, especially if you're studying ourselves, it's like we're inherently paradoxical. So it's like we're constantly evolving and growing. So it's actually the opposite of that. Especially since astrologers are ruled by Sagittarius. Astrology is ruled by Scorpio and Aquarius. Scorpio is like the psychological, occult, mystical aspect, and Aquarius is the mathematical, scientific, technical. But we got to infuse all of that to get to Sagittarius, which is a mutable sign. So there's so much flexibility in it, and I just think it's so interesting.
Exactly. So it's actually pretty open-minded. And I also want to add something. I should have said that at the beginning. So in my profession as an astrologer, so when I read the charts, I tell the clients that like you come to me for having a birth chart reading, and which is perfect. Like you will get to know yourself. And now that you are into astrology, you should also get therapies, like maybe not regularly, like not every week, but at least regularly. So for them, like in the readings, I just talk about possible themes for therapy. Like you might have these struggles and you can talk to these topics with your therapist. So I'm not a doctor. I don't diagnose anything. I'm not a psychiatrist, psychologist, or doctor, but I just direct them to therapy, to psychological discussions. So yeah, that's also what we do, and what we do as astrologers. All right. So for Frida, now the rest of the participants, do you have any questions to Frida? What she said, like any comments? Like I can have you one by one if you raise your hand. Yeah. Now Jasmina and then Nick. Yeah.
I just want to say that hats off to you, Frida. I think what you're doing is honorable. It's brave. And you are one of the courageous people I know, you know, to give up your license, to combine this studies and everything. Anyway, you're like an example for others to follow your example. That's what I want to say. I really think it's not easy for you, your internal battle, as you explained, and what happened. And the path you chose. I think it's amazing. And I think with your book and with your work, I think you're going to help many people and other psychologists also to open up more to astrology.
Thank you so much, Jasmina. It means so much. And I just want to say, as a response to that, that coming together with astrologers in international settings has helped a lot, because in other countries they have other regulations and rules. So that has helped me to expand my horizons and understand that it is possible. And I also want to say that I feel very courageous, but I was at like a PhD day a few weeks ago where we met and we talk about sustainability and research and everything. And all of a sudden, one of the other PhD candidates turned to me and she said, "By the way, don't you run like a company on the side or something?" Like, she was curious. And then I found myself again in that position where my throat is just blocked and I'm like scared of saying something. So it happens to me again and again still, and that's something I have acceptance for. I don't talk too much about astrology with my colleagues and stuff like that, because they are in academia. There have even been research articles coming out from my department, the Department of Psychology at Lund University, where they have done studies on, okay, people who believe in astrology, they score higher on narcissism and lower on intelligence, like those kind of research studies. And despite that, I'm just like, whatever, you know. It's another kind of perspective that they take. If I were to do research on astrology, I would much rather do some kind of qualitative study and ask, how has this enriched your life? Or I've been trying to maybe set up some therapy trial, work with CBT, and compare it to CBT and astrology, for example, like those kind of things that can make us grow. But other researchers where I'm at, they're very much into trying to debunk, destroy, and criticize. And that's okay, but thanks to situations and communities like these, I keep my backbone strong, you could say.
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so Nick, you raise your hand.
Yeah, I just also wanted to commend you on your bravery, and I know it's difficult in academia. I was kind of curious if throughout your colleagues and other people that you've worked with, if you've seen any other people who are in psychology who also have an interest in astrology, and also curious if there is maybe a generational difference between certain people's perspectives of astrology. One thing I think about is maybe 20 or 40 years ago, especially in Jungian circles, people might have been more open to astrology and tarot, but perhaps has that changed in the present for, I'm not sure if I can't tell if things are getting better or worse in some circles, because maybe behind academia, there's maybe only people who are more scientific materialists that are staying in those realms, and people that are not are moving into other places. So I'm just kind of curious if how you've connected with other astrologer psychology people within the ivory towers.
Yeah, I have actually. I have connected with a lot of people, but I have to say most of them are scared of coming out and saying out loud that I'm a therapist, psychologist, or a doctor, whatever, nurse,
Yeah.
and I practice astrology. Most of them are scared because of the stigma and the fact that they can lose their license and lose their job, basically. But I've had like some private psychiatrists and therapists, psychotherapists, refer clients to me, and they like therapists who were into Jungian methods. So then they come to me. But interestingly enough, that's why some people get a little bit they think it's strange what I do also, because I am actually not a Jungian psychologist. I'm not so interested in that type of psychology. I'm leaning more towards like CBT, acceptance commitment therapy, and positive psychology. So when some people hear like, oh, but you're into like CBT and third wave CBT and positive psychology, oh, and astrology, that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But
they think it has to be one or the other, perhaps.
Yeah, they always
both.
expect you to like take sides and be like, I'm this. And that's why I say, no, we can be more than that. We can bridge perspectives, and that's how we grow. Yeah.
Yeah, and just break all the taboos with every conversation.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, perfect. So now Jaymie raised her hand.
Hi, Frida. Yes, so much of what you said has really resonated, and you actually touched on things that I wanted to ask you about because I can only speak from the perspective of an astrologer, and I noticed patterns and stuff. And I've been trained in medical astrology, and I use horary, which is a branch of astrology where you can ask specific questions to get specific answers. But ethically speaking, I'm not a psychologist. I've taken psychology classes, but I'm not credentialed. So I am very careful, and this is why like I have clients and friends who have a medical background. So I ask them and I verify the work. And so I personally noticed certain correlations with clients or with patients that do well with EMDR. There's a correlation with EMDR and with war vets versus like CBT, DBT, as well as abusive men doing better with support groups more than individual, which I think that one is also like been proven in the psychology community. But there are these correlations, and so I'm always very careful. And I say very upfront, I'm like, I'm not a trained psychologist. This is the pattern that I've noticed, having worked with other psychologists. Here are some resources. Here are, things of that nature. And I live in Los Angeles, so people are a bit more open-minded. And so there's been a lot of research coming out with, I have a client who, not an astrology client, but I also do house and pet sitting. And she has a ketamine clinic out of her home. And there's also therapists who've been using MDMA and stuff. And so I was just wondering, I've noticed certain correlations, but I was wondering if that's something that you've noticed as well.
I have not really focused too much on that. Do you refer to now sorry, can you explain more in depth the correlations, what you mean exactly? So I am sure I understand.
So like one of my big things is that like when clients come to me, I want to provide them with as much information so that it saves them time, effort, and energy through processes that I've had to go through because it can be really discouraging. And so I work with a lot of people who are like, I really want to know the best way for me to process my traumas. So I look at like the 8th house, their Scorpio placements, the rulers of Scorpio, the rulers of their 8th house. And like since the second sign is always the resource of the previous sign, I always look at Sagittarius as well as like whatever is in the 9th house and the aspects. And I've just noticed certain correlations. Like for those of you who don't know, EMDR is eye movement rapid desensitization, and it's the type of eye movement technique that allows you to process and traumas. And they've done a lot of studies, and there's been a lot of correlations and success with war vets. And I've seen that with like my own personal friends, and I've noticed certain correlations, like certain treatments, and just the patterns that I've noticed as far as like who is best suited versus not, just pattern recognition of like certain methods tend to work better with people who are more high functioning in their trauma versus people who are a little bit more anxious. And I've done a lot of focus on neurodivergence just because that's something that I experience. And so when it comes to like regulating the nervous system and stuff, I have a friend who did her undergrad in neuroscience. So like I've had a lot of like consultation and coaching to kind of get trained in these areas. And so with the nervous system, there's the hypo and hyper arousal, where some people are over or understimulated. And so I've noticed that like oftentimes there's like this blanket like recommendation of like, this is the best way to process something. And it really depends on where they are in the spectrum of their nervous system. And so I've noticed certain correlations, but I'm also like, I don't have a psych background. So I'm very cautious about what I share, what I don't share. But I was just wondering if you yourself have noticed certain patterns of like certain people with, work with certain, I mean, I know you're not getting their birth time, so it's a little bit, like difficult on your end, but like if someone is born at a certain time and with your background in astrology and psychology, I suspect like, if like their moon placement, I mean, I don't know if you practice this or not, but like, I know some psychologists who, based on their moon placement, will communicate with them in a way that they know is going to benefit their patient from being more assertive to taking a gentler approach. My Mercury is in Aquarius, so I don't have that level of adaptability, but I was just wondering if you had noticed patterns. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I haven't, because I never dared to, when I worked as a clinical psychologist, I never brought astrology into the room because I was so scared, to be honest, because of the repercussions, what can happen. But I do believe that there's no problem in recommending certain methods or therapies for you as a practitioner. I think that there could be, like, for example, if you have, I don't know, a heavy 12th house energy or something like that, and yeah, turn to some kind of meditative practices, or turn to creative pursuits and stuff like that to explore the boundlessness of yourself. And, you know, I think a lot about those things. Or self-compassion is something that we can always recommend to our clients, right? Because that's something that is evidence-based. To apply self-compassion to yourself has a lot of benefits, and we can adjust that according to moon signs, for example. That's a great idea. But in terms of, yeah, I don't know if I was clear, but I no longer see like therapy clients as a psychologist. Instead, I am just in my practice as an astrologer slash psychologist something. And on my like daytime job is at the university as a PhD student, where I have no contact at all with individuals in that sense, because I am part of a large research project where we study mental health in the school. So there I work on like a large scale. So I get my fun working with one-on-ones in my practice, and there I just do whatever I want basically now, when I don't no longer am tied to the license.
I mean, I can't imagine how terrifying it must have been to have done that, especially after all the investment. But I think it's so amazing that you've done that. And it's so interesting. I keep meeting people in different fields that have actually gave up their license. And it's just, I think it's so fascinating. And like, as terrifying as it might have been, like, for as an outsider, I'm so excited for you and everyone you're gonna help. Like, I don't know if you're still processing, but I'm just like, this is so exciting for the rest of us. You know, it's like you're no longer shackled, and so you get to really be a full of who you are, which I think is so amazing. And thank you for doing that, because it's obviously a huge sacrifice for you, but I also would like to believe that it's really rewarding and it's mutually beneficial. And thank you from all of us.
Thank you for saying, because it's so important, and that's going to be my last sentence for now, but it's so important to follow what we are passionate about. And for me, working as a clinical psychologist in Sweden, I mean, it's a job. I was required to meet 8 patients a day. 8 patients a day. I have to reach my targets. I have to think about the financials of the clinic. I have to bring it. It was a hard job, I have to say. And that's actually not what I imagined when I studied to become a psychologist, because my main passion was that I want to help people. That was my main goal. I was not thinking about I have to sit in a clinic and help, and like, even though I do my best, I'm so steered by the management and what they decide is the best. And I know that research is biased, so that means that they are also going to be a scientifically driven clinic, but in that comes also the financial aspect. They have to like fine-tune everything, and basically I'm just like a little part of a big machinery. So I cannot sit in those environments. Like, I wish I could, and I bow to the people that still can, but I had to break out of it. And it is scary, because now when I no longer have a license, my PhD is ending next year in August, and after that I have to see what I'm going to do. Am I going to pursue a full-time career as an astrologer, or am I going to go into some kind of postdoc research project somewhere in the world? Will they accept all of me then? That's very important. Like, it is a sacrifice, and only going into academia again is a sacrifice, because you have to go from one type of salary as a clinical psychologist to a much lower salary in academia. So, but like I say, final word, follow the passion always. That's gonna be my like my my motto in life, even though it's scary. But I believe in that. I believe it's more rewarding at all levels.
Well, yeah. Well, you're
Sorry.
literally the archetype where you can really practice with yourself what that looks like, you know, because it's like you have the resource of astrology and psychology to determine which method works best for you. Because like those restrictions, they're there and they're real, but I also feel like there's so many opportunities, and it's just about finding them, creating them. And I don't know what the regulations are in Sweden, but because I know people who have done stuff like this, like I know people, not their PhD, but with their MD, they they had their they chose to get their medical license removed, and then they ended up getting licensed in Texas in the US. So there's also other ways nowadays. I feel like this is the best time. I'd like to believe that you came into this world during this timeline where things are remote, so that you have these options and stuff.
I think so. I hope so.
Yeah.
And that's why I like to connect with all of you guys, like I say, because that broadens the perspectives. And yes, I don't think I can stay in Sweden, because it's, like I say, if I can survive like this in Sweden, I can probably survive anywhere.
Yeah, thank you so much, both of you. And now Jasmina
sorry.
is about to say something.
Yeah, just one sentence. As Uranus coming into Gemini is going to trine Pluto, I think, Frida, that's going to be absolutely great alignment in the skies for this type of things, and I think you can actually be a leader of a new movement. That's what I'm going to say.
Well, thank you, thank you. And I'm going to be so curious about how all of you work in other countries. That's going to be my main interest, to hear everyone else talk about what we do. Like, yes.
Yeah,
Thank you so much
exactly.
for letting me
Welcome. Thank you so
tell my
much.
story.
So just that you say it, and we have a psychologist here, Daniel, and he's from Brazil, and I think he will offer lots of valuable perspective to the change in countries, and his practice, his approach to astrology, and so on. Yeah. So now the turn is Daniel's. So you can introduce yourself, your background, your interest in both fields, and yeah, you can just talk about why you are here.
All right, everyone. Yeah, I'm really glad to be here, first of all. I'm 35 years old. I'm currently in Brazil. This is where I was born. I lived abroad for 2 years in Canada. And astrology actually is in my life for almost 20 years now. And I was always interested in this field of knowledge, and how it can, it actually helped me a lot through some major times in my life. And I'm always thankful to astrologers, the good ones especially. And as a psychologist, psychology, it's something that I was already before I graduated in psychology. It's kind of part of who I am. And here it's in Brazil, it's similar to Sweden and I guess other countries. I talked a little bit with Ishmael too, and he said that there's also some strictness in psychology and the practice and the clinical practice of it in the UK. So I live with that kind of fear. It is a fear, Frida is very, very brave, very brave, because risking my license is something that's it gets to me. Although I really love astrology, I also love psychology, and I love the process of having my patients, because healing trauma and it's a process. It takes time. And I love how Matt has that approach to what he sees in the chart, because astrology can be so direct. Maybe you can see everything about that person just by reading a chart. Where the main traumas and pains, where they come from, and also how to deal with them. So astrology has a lot of power to see and to say about other people. And maybe that's why the narcissism came on that research, Frida, because people want to know about themselves, a lot of people don't take it seriously, don't take astrology seriously. They just want to know about their sun sign and how amazing they are, and that's it. And astrology is so much more profound than that, right? And it's something, you know. I was recently, you know, a couple of years ago, was diagnosed with ADHD. So yeah, and it got me thinking, because, you know, in contact with astrology all these years, I thought, wait, if I look at my chart, you know, Sun conjoining Mars, opposing the Moon in Aries, and it's also all squared by Jupiter in Cancer. And so it's a very afflicted map. You know, I got, I had one astrologer once, and he's really famous. He's not with us anymore, unfortunately. And the first thing he said when he looked at my map was, "Oh, damn, it must be hard being you." So it comes to leading with who I am, you know, it's not about the diagnosis. So astrology helped me more than psychiatry on that matter, because, you know, you got these placements and you got to deal with them. So it's real. You got to deal with whoever you are, not medicate it. You don't need to medicate it. I'm going to have to deal with who I am for the rest of my life. So therapy helps me with the rest of my life part, you know. And I think both of these fields can work so well together, so well. I just don't know how to do it. I really want to do it. I don't know how yet. And Frida got me really inspired to start doing things differently. My patients, they don't. I don't bring astrology to my patients either, just like Frida. And but sometimes one other patient likes astrology and start talking about it, and sometimes I cannot help myself to talk together with it. No.
Yeah, it must be difficult to keep silent. Like I had that thing. I was also working at university as a teacher, but when students were talking about astrology, I was quiet. So I was just, wow. So I get that. Okay.
Yeah, and I love the job I do already, but I think I can do more. I currently work in the universal healthcare system here in Brazil, so all sorts of violence, you know, I come across with vulnerable people, especially children and women. I think they suffer more. And men, usually they don't work on themselves as hard as women, and I think that's a problem, because when women come to be my patients, they are, you know, they have to deal with their own pain and the man there that lives with them usually. And so I think we have a lot of work to do. And I look at all of you, and I feel glad that there are so many good people trying to make this a better place to live, you know, make this a place of evolving, of loving, of understanding, and not defining our paths anymore by pain and trauma. So I'd like to thank you all for that. You're really inspiring me.
Thank you so much. So now it's still Daniel's session, and I will first give turn to Frida, as she is also a psychologist, and then I will have your questions to Daniel, okay, one by one. So now, Frida.
Yes, I just had a question to you, Daniel. First, thank you for sharing everything and for your kind words. But I was wondering, because like I said, in Sweden, it's very inclined towards CBT and like those kind of methods, and not so much okay here to practice Jungian psychology or psychodynamic therapy. How is it in Brazil? Is it similar or different?
Here, the universities, you know, academia things, they are mostly psychoanalysis. Sigmund Freud and Jacques Lacan, in these authors. You know, French school is very powerful, especially where I live. I don't like it. When it comes to psychoanalysis, I like more the English authors, you know, Donna Winnicott and Melanie Klein, these authors. But Jungian, you almost don't hear about it. You know, it's fairly rare to see Jungian therapists here. It's becoming a little bit more, you know, common to see, but still we have we have a long way on that, because in universities they do not teach us that. They don't.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, because I always tend to, but I'm biased based on where I'm from, but I tend to believe that it would be easier for psychologists or therapists in countries where they are more into Freudian psychology and these things, because from my perspective, I think that has perhaps less how do you say, scientific support in some sense. And then I would think that, oh, but based on that, they would also be more open to like astrology and other methods that are not so scientifically proven yet. But maybe that's wrong.
Yeah, it's kind of curious, because, you know, psychoanalysts, you know, he struggled so much to put psychoanalysis into science, you know, and most of the psychoanalysts I know, they turn it into almost a cult. You know, no, there's nothing else. No, psychoanalysis has to explain everything. So it's kind of odd.
Yeah, but still that gives me some hope, because at like 100 years ago, psychoanalysis was not accepted. So this also gives me hope for astrology, for example, or some other practices to be more mainstream. Yeah. Okay, so anybody who has questions to Daniel, you can raise your hand. Yeah, Jasmina.
It was so nice to hear and meet you and hear from you. How is it in Brazil? I know Brazil struggles with a lot of different things. So, you know, a therapy is not exception. I was just wondering, I know that, you know, it's hard with all your work and everything, but do you have a wish, maybe? Do you have a passion to actually practice astrology?
Yes, I do. Just like I said, I don't know how to integrate this thing yet, but it seems like I've come to a point of no return. I cannot deny it anymore. You know, it's
So
grown.
do you feel that Frida and you and people like you can kind of somehow get together and make this movement? I'm like trying to make a movement in the world for all of you.
Yeah, that's what I wrote in our Instagram chat group, Cosmic Therapists Alliance.
Yes, that you know, we always like to connect people and making some major impact and difference. So if you can help each other, if we as an astrologer can help you in any way with our approach, the way we talk about astrology, let us know. I really feel that, Frida, your book is going to be helpful in that way. I already have like a couple of my friends psychologists. I'm going to just give them a book. Look, happy birthday, Merry Christmas. Here you go. You know, so I'm thinking about that. If we can support you in any way, the way we approach astrology, the way we talk about astrology, that can help make this more we can combine these two things together in a more efficient way. Let us know. Give us some guidelines.
Anyway. I like that. I like that a lot. You know, thank you for saying that. You know, this is so good to know that I don't have to struggle with this alone. So having help, that would be awesome. You know, having people doing it together, you know, making it sort of community, it would be awesome. Really, really, really. And I'm in. I'm totally in.
Yeah, and I think we can all meet there, because I mean, people who are really passionate about astrology, I think we can all unite a little bit against the, how can you say, pop cult version of astrology and the social media astrology that is growing very fast, very much. we can all unite a little bit there, and we can also unite around ethics and around, for example, not speaking in absolutes or not, you know, those kind of things. I think that helps astrology as a subject on so many levels, and can really show that astrology is so complex, right? But it doesn't have to be complicated, that we can all stand united there. I think
Absolutely.
yeah.
There's room for everyone and everything,
Absolutely.
as long as we're doing good.
All unite. All right. So anybody, and do you have any questions to Daniel? You can raise your hand. Nick, Melina, Mihaela. Yeah, Jaymie.
So I have two questions for, I guess, both of you, Daniel and Frida, is from like the perspective of talking about like ethics and stuff like that, like astrology I think is so beautiful, and I have mixed feelings about it being unregulated. I like that it's not, because I feel like it gives us like freedom. There isn't legal restrictions and stuff. Like I think that's one of the reasons why I really didn't want to gravitate towards psychology, is I became familiar. There are certain things where it's like psychologists get red flagged if you don't diagnose someone, and you know there's all these pressures, and that didn't resonate with me, and we don't have those things in astrology. But I also think that, you know, there isn't this clear blueprint of ethics, and I mean I'm not entirely convinced that like the ethics that exist in my personal opinion as an outsider, I don't agree with a lot of the, or some of the ethics that I know of in psychology. But what would you guys, if you guys were to like, you know, understanding things from like a psychological and astrological perspective, what are some examples of like ethics that you would like to see infused between those two realms? That's my first question. You want to answer that first?
You want to go, Frida?
Yes, I mean, I can just say shortly that I think there should be organizations that can govern these kind of questions and have like guidelines presented. I know there have been a few ethicalastrologers.org and other organizations, but perhaps we would need more organizations where we can, how can you say, choose ourselves to be part of, to show that, okay, but I take this seriously. We don't have to be forced to do it, but we can choose it. That could be one way that I think of. And quite honestly, I have been to many astrologers myself, and some of them very big names over the years. And I can say that some of them have told me things that are, in retrospect, very unethical. And it's difficult for me to like navigate these things, because I know they are very skilled astrologers. Like they know so much about astrology. They can pinpoint things to very exact measures. But that's where my the focus comes down to. It's not always about like what we say, or like our skills in that sense. It's about how do we craft a session, how do we meet a person. And that's where I think astrology and psychology can really bridge. It's about meeting another human being. It's about like connecting to someone else in a nice way and not do any harm. So I think that's one of the major focus points we need to get to, like how do we do that and learn from each other.
Yeah,
That's such a
I just want to
Yeah.
interrupt quickly. Sorry. Like as an astrologer, like my first ethical rule is that I should not affect someone's choice, someone's free will. So that for example, that can be one. I'm sorry. Yeah, Jaymie.
Oh yeah, no, that's such a good point, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because I feel like sometimes it's like as astrologers we have information, or even psychologists, like we have information, but my whole thing is I'm like, is it going to benefit my client to know this? And if it is going to benefit them, what is the best way to deliver that? Like, you know, I offer either video or written readings, and if I know that it's something where it's like I should be more intentional in how I deliver it, I might do a written PDF and stuff. And I just feel like that's something that's really important. And I have a friend who's a doctor, and she has a background in neuroscience, and I look at her and I'm just like, man, the way she delivers information, it's designed to be digestible. It's designed to overcome self-sabotage, to desensitize any potential triggers. And I think that that's so great. And those are things that I'm like, man, like I wish I was trained in something like that. So that I thought was a really good point. Thank you. And what are your thoughts, Daniel?
Well, your question is a good one, and I think that as long as we have a community that has a common goal towards what we are doing, and I think we can make it work. We can make it work. That's what I think. There's something to debate once we organize ourselves. I think, like Frida said, it's important to organize ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Can
And
I ask,
yeah,
so can I ask another question?
yeah.
So I just thought it was so fascinating. I'm sorry, I can't remember which one of you guys mentioned that there was a study done that psychologists who study astrology lean towards narcissism. And it's one of those things where I agree that sometimes it's not about the diagnosis, and that, like, I'm not trained, to be able to give a diagnosis. But like at the end of the day, if I'm looking at someone's chart, I don't need to know whether someone is or isn't ADHD. It's like I recognize, okay, there are some learning challenges, and here are some methods that can support that, and it's less about like the title, but how can I support this person ultimately? And so I feel like, there's positive and negative manifestations to every placement, all of these different things. And something I find so interesting is I'm not surprised, but when you mentioned that narcissism is tied with astrology, like psychology and astrology, it's so interesting because in astrology, like true brilliance, true intelligence is ruled by the fifth house, Leo, the sun, which is creative. And I mean, like we have to be very careful. Like narcissism isn't just a Leo, isn't just the fifth house, isn't just the sun. You got to consider other things, and Pisces and 12. There's so many different things to consider. But the reason why it's associated with the sun, like Leo, is because like things are revolving around the sun. And so there's like this narcissistic, like that's why I feel like that analysis is correct in that like the lower manifestation of the sun can be narcissism, but it's also like creative brilliance. And so because the way I think, I'm like, wow, like I think it's so beautiful that they made that correlation, because that tells me that I'm sorry, I hope you guys can still hear me. That tells me that like there's like some indicator that psychologists that use astrology are using creative intelligence, unique insights. And so, and I don't know, maybe the people that they did study were problematically misusing like the energy, but there are ways to redirect that. So I'm just wondering if there is a way that you guys can see using like the sun placement in a way that helps. So like the positive manifestation of narcissism, Leo, the sun, in order to actually support people, because I do think that the sun does play a role. It is healing energy. It is truth energy. So it makes sense. It's about our life force energy who we're growing into. It makes sense that the sun is going to play a big role in therapy. And so I don't mean it from the perspective of like sun sign, but because psychology like looked at this through like a biased lens and still focused on the sun. Do you think that there's a way to use the sun energy, or do you think it's like so premature, similar to like with a basic astrology where they use like the sun and it's just not in depth? Do you think it's like just too premature, or do you think that there is a way to use the sun in psychology to actually, for therapists to best support themselves and their patients?
I would like to say something about this because it's very interesting. And that is, first of all, I just want to make a reference to narcissism and narcissistic traits. And I tend to see that discussion a little bit like similar to what we see as pop cult astrology within the field of astrology, right? Because it's sensational. Oh, I was together with I was not. Narcissist is a word we hear a lot. It's a buzzword. But anyway, I want to also say that the way I do, or in my practice, in my book as well, when I connected to positive psychology constructs, then I connected to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Which first we saw self-actualization as the top so say need for humans to self-actualize, which I connect to the sun. But in the updated version, which came later, there they have changed the hierarchy. So then the highest need is self-transcendence. So that I connect to Neptune instead, because I work with all the planets as a modern astrologer. And then I can see the balance here. Okay, how can we self-actualize the sun? And how can we combine that with self-transcendence via Neptune? And the interesting part is also, if we look at these concepts from a research perspective in the science of well-being, we see that people who self-actualize, they also have, it's easier for them to also self-transcend. So it doesn't contradict each other at all, which we tend to believe. We tend to think that, okay, but if I self-actualize, then it will be more difficult for me to connect with like a universal feeling of oneness. But no, it's actually not true according to science. And that's basically how I build my practice, to debunk these ideas and show that, look, we can work with astrology and connect it, and it doesn't have to contradict either way. Yeah, that was my answer. I leave it to you now, Daniel.
Oh my God, thank you. That was the answer that I didn't know I wanted and needed, because I was like, there's something there. And I was like, I don't like the narcissism. It's definitely one-dimensional. But like, it's so interesting because in my mind, I translate everything to astrology. So I'm like, they're basically saying that psychologists that use astrology are connected to the sun. So I was like, and I believe that, so I wanted to know, like, the positive higher manifestation of that. And I love that's beautiful. I mean, I was already interested in your book, but now I'm like, really, you've activated my Scorpio 8th house obsession in your book now. Thank you.
That feels
Thank
good
you.
for my Scorpio moon.
Yeah,
Oh,
I have
good.
some Scorpio. All right, so now Marc raises his hand. Sorry, Marc, what would you like to say?
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you, Frida. Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Matt, for organizing this. This is awesome to see that we're bringing in new innovators and bridging these two fields. It's just exciting to think that you can possibly have like a therapy session and have like an intake meeting or something on like a transit of your first house or something, and then like being able to have your therapist being able to understand you, and then having another meeting where you are on the transit of your 12th house and learning more about your subconscious. Just there's a lot of different directions that this type of studying can go towards. So I really do appreciate this type of information and meeting. But my question would probably be for Matt and Frida and Daniel is, when you're meeting with folks with an understanding of this type of knowledge, I'm sure that there's times when you come to a point where there's you kind of have to meet the client where they're at in their field of understanding. So I wanted to kind of ask or open the conversation of how you would foresee that conversation going with these two differences of subjects, and like how that meeting place would look like.
Well, that's a good suggestion. First of all, Marc, just to work with transits whenever I'm with the patient. That would be really cool, actually. Well, I don't know if I quite understand your question. How would be a setting for working these two fields? Is that it? Is that what you're asking?
Because I feel like the way that psychology, or there's a lot of guidelines in terms of how a patient is being approached by their doctor, but within like an astrologer meeting, there's also kind of that patient client energy going on, where somebody kind of has a lot of the information or knowledge or a lot of the power in the conversation, and then there's someone that kind of is coming towards them with a lacking or a wanting to understand. So I was just wondering how that could look like.
We supposedly have that understanding because at the end of the day, each one has its own path to trail. So it's not like I can give any formulas, because I can't talk about forgiveness here and tell you have to forgive someone, but how do you really forgive? That's how we do therapy. It's the path, because I don't forgive the same way you do forgive. I don't practice self-compassion the same way you do. So I have to look at you, the words you use, what's important for you in the moment. You can analyze the transits and see it's like a forecast. You know, if it's gonna rain, you're gonna have to protect yourself from that. You know, maybe it's not the time to do something when it's raining. So I think that that's the case. You know, we could work as looking at astrology as a time lord. There's a time for everything. And maybe when you're on your 12th house, it's time to be with yourself, you know, do things by yourself, and practice art, spirituality, and those kinds of things, and see what comes from that on the patient's experience, you know. And it's just a matter of suggestion, because when patients leave the room, they'll do whatever, you know, and they'll come back and we'll talk about it. And that's the thing, that's the path. Thank you, Marc.
But that I got so inspired by what you said, because I think that's how psychology can learn from astrology, because astrology is very time sensitive in that way. And that, for me, that's a way of increasing the client's agency, because that way we can get like a confirmation based on the chart. Because many times the client feels, for example, that yeah, I'm in a situation now where I feel I need to tend to myself, and that we can see that as astrologers, and we can get the confirmation that strengthens the client's own sense of knowledge about themselves or their own agency, and that can be so powerful. And sometimes we miss that in psychology. And
Yes.
also about the interaction that was in like I understood the question. I think it's so super important to recognize that both in the astrological practice as well as in the psychological practice, we have power imbalances. That's just how it is. That's how I see it. Always. Because I even experience this when I go to an astrologer. Immediately when I have booked a session, my mind starts going, what is this person going to say now about me? I'm so curious. What's going to come up? This person knows a lot about astrology. Oh, more than me. And then we get into this, like, yeah, you know what I mean? We get the anticipation. And that happens in the psychiatric or therapeutic session. I've experienced it many times when I've had long waiting lists with clients that waited a long time to come see a psychologist, and then they finally come. And then the pressure is on me. Oh, hello, yes, and they're huge anticipation. So I have to try to adjust that somehow. And the same goes in astrology, because we even have one more dimension there, because we as astrologers, we speak a language that the client might not speak on the same level, the astrological language. We can look at a chart. I mean, I also remember the first time I had my chart read, I was scared. And maybe this is my Scorpio moon, I don't know. But like, I was like, what are they seeing about me? What are all these symbols? What do they mean? Like, what is that they can see about me that I don't see myself? And that's why I think it's so important as astrologers to have some kind of disclaimers, or like you said, Matt, you start the session a certain way. For example, I always say, this is only a perspective. I'm going to bring you a perspective, and I'm here to empower you and try to increase your own agency, favor that. So it's also up to you to pick what you think is valuable for you. You know yourself best, you know, we always do. So it's so important because that's how I think we can also open people and get them more receptive to the messages we convey. Otherwise, if we are scared or if we are worried what's going to come up, we close up, right? So it's so good to have something in the beginning that's like, calm down, your session is recorded, you don't need to take notes, or calm down, it's not going to be some doomsday message coming up here, to relax it and adjust these power imbalances that always exist. Yeah.
Thank you, Frida.
Also,
That's great.
thank you, Frida. For Daniel's answer, I want to say something personal. Like, I had North Node in my 12th house for a year, and I knew that like I might start therapy, regular therapy. And like a couple of months ago, I have started regular therapy, and I checked the date that I started therapy. The moon was in Sagittarius in my 8th house. So like I was really amazed by this. So like divine timing, it just happened by itself. So the first moment of my therapy. So yeah, I think that also explains Daniel's point of view for that. Okay. All right, so does anybody have any questions to Daniel and Frida? If not, we will start with the sessions of astrologers. No, okay. So now we are going to start with the astrologers, but before we do, would you like to have break? Do you need anything? Like we can have a short break if you would like. Okay. Okay, so thank you, Frida and Daniel, for the perspective of psychology. And now we are going to move on to astrologers, including me. But I will keep myself at the end, so I am the moderator. And for this session of astrologers, we have Lauren, Jasmina, Jaymie, and Marc. So I want to start with Lauren, and she can first introduce herself and talk about her practice, talk about her approach to astrology and psychology. So it's your turn, Lauren. So welcome. Microphone is off. You can, yeah, unmute yourself. Yeah, thank you.
Take three.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren. I obviously am an astrologer, avid student for years, and launched my business in February. So it's important to know, actually, let me give you my stats. So I'm very, very Scorpio. I have Venus on my ascendant, as well as Uranus in Scorpio, as well as my sun. And then my moon is in the 8th in Gemini. So I always like to say you'll never meet a Scorpio that talks as much as me, and that's my Gemini moon. That Gemini moon, right? Like I noticed the need for constant connection and communication. I love to talk. I'm a really good listener, which I'll pivot to what my experience in life was. So I was in corporate America for over 20 years. I quit cold turkey in September. I just felt like I wasn't getting what I needed. And I knew that like astrology was my retirement plan, but I kind of got thrown into it a lot sooner. I'm kind of just dipping my toes in. I'm not kind of full blown yet. I'm trying to just honor the transition of, the Scorpio transmutation and how I need to change and evolve into this new role in my life. But yeah, no, I've always worked with therapists. Oh God, since I was in my 20s. But then I started working with my psychiatrist during the pandemic, which was obviously 2020. I got diagnosed with ADHD June of 2020, which is important because if you think about it, me being corporate Lauren, right? I was either on the road driving, traveling, or in an office. And most recently, the office I was in at the time was Oracle, right? So I sold for big tech. I was one of 3 women on a floor of 80 men. So I was just used to constant like, hey, how do you do this on the computer? Or like, let me show you how to log your new order, whatever. But then I got put in my home with no one to talk to. Obviously, I have my little cats, but I missed that daily interaction. I started to like go a little crazy. And my therapist at the time, who was wonderful, we had parted ways after that, but she referred me to my psychiatrist who, it was like, I remember it was my dad's birthday, June 23rd. And she's like, she gave a whole questionnaire and she's like, answer yes or no. And answer as if you were 11 years old. And I was like, how the hell am I going to remember what it was like to be 11? Luckily, I had an older sister that would tell me, we couldn't take you out to eat. You wouldn't sit still. And I got very good grades in school. I was very determined, very organized, very smart. I graduated 10th in my class in high school, but I didn't test well, right? So I kind of knew that there was something, I'm not going to say wrong with me, but there was some disconnect, right? But back in those days, they didn't really care. So my SAT scores were low. I still got into a great college, did really well in college, graduated with a bachelor's of science in communications. So immediately from there, I took a year off and then went into sales. And then it was media and then big tech. So as far as the ADHD, it's one of those things I've always known. I didn't know it was so much the H, but I've always known that I had issues focusing. And then the diagnosis came 4 years ago, which was great because it kind of helped me. And then another thing, like when I first started looking at my chart with Uranus, like, degrees away from my ascendant, I noticed that my nervous system is in full gear. Like I'm always going. The Gemini brain is always moving. And you know, with my parents' deaths, I lost them both pretty young. My mom's been 15 years. My dad's been about, we'll go with 7, 6.5. So yeah, there's been intense grief, you know, being a Scorpio as I am, and there's been parts of myself that die, and then I have to rebirth them. And I'm kind of going through that metamorphosis right now. But I don't know what else I was supposed to cover, Matt. I can pause for questions, or did I miss anything?
No, that's perfect. Like you are also giving us your insight as an astrologer. So my first question for you is that like when you are reading birth charts or when you are offering consultations, whether pre-recorded or one-to-one, how do you make use of this background of yourself, for example?
The first thing I like to do is like look at their nodes, because that gives me the indication of like where they're comfortable, where their gifts are. Jupiter's also going to show that. Chiron's going to show kind of where they struggle, but where they can transmute to be a healer. And I like to use my own personal experience, right? Like when you guys, this is actually funny. I always just identified as a Scorpio. So the first person that read my chart, they're like, you have a Gemini moon. And I had dated a Gemini and it did not go well. So I was like, there's no way I'm Gemini. So I like to actually kind of take my corporate experience, right, of like the 20 years, and then me looking at my chart and really being comfortable with, okay, own the Gemini. You should never be ashamed of that. Like, look at the way I speak. Look at how I text so fast. Like, it's clearly in my personality. The Uranus on my ascendant, someone said to me yesterday, you shouldn't have any glass in your house. Like you're constantly dropping stuff, right? Like I didn't realize that I was klutzy and disruptive and innovative. So yes, when reading a client's chart, I like to help them career-wise, just to make sure they're doing the right things. I feel like, you know, we sometimes as astrologers get a certain type of person. So my first paid reading, and I was doing them free for years and years, my first paid reading, she had everything in the 8th. Like her whole chart was like, boom, the pie was just all in the 8th, but it was Libra. So I realized the types of clients I was going to attract at that point, like anyone that kind of was magnetized to my Scorpio-ness or could feel my intensity and wanted to kind of help on how to, you know, those issues themselves, or death, parents' death. So, you know, I use it holistically. I am able to kind of always point them in the right direction. And I said recently, I think somewhere on Instagram, like I only really give about 50 to 70% of what I'm seeing. Everything I'm doing in the chart is to get them to the next level, like to help them step up. I had worked with a professional astrologer over the course of a year in 2022, and I was going through an extremely hard time. And we would meet every couple months. So like I was kind of forced to be like, okay, here's the improvement I've made, right? And that's how I want to work with people, because these one-off sessions, I know, Matt, you touched upon this at all in the beginning, you know, I want to do the natal chart first and then do the solar return and then work with them throughout the year to kind of be their accountability coach on, okay, did you do the self-love, you know, journaling or exercise? Because that's that 8th house particular client, that was my recommendation to her. And then I have an energy healer that I'm probably going to bring on board because I refer a lot of people out to her for chakra balancing when I see, I mean, I'm not there to do any of that work yet, but I want my clients to be open that here I am, here's a, you know, the pie chart of your life from birth to death. Here's where I see the challenges are. Here's what my recommendations are. Here's people that can help you from here, right? Like there's so many different layers of the metaphysical world. So you know, I like to use my experience being so intense. And I'm also I have a stellium, obviously in Scorpio and in Sag, so I'm a little fiery. But I like to connect on that level and just kind of give them the best advice I can and make sure that they actually do it and then come back, right? So I've been doing my business is Mastermind Astrology. I incorporated the Scorpio symbol into the logo, which I was really proud of because I'm proud to be a Scorpio. It's not an easy life, so you got to own it. But yeah, no, I've been doing pop-up events at boutiques. Tonight, I live next door to Salem, Massachusetts. I just moved 9 weeks ago. I'm going to a new moon event in Salem, trying to network there. So lots of exciting things going on for me, but I'm still new. I'm a very good businesswoman, but being an entrepreneur and doing it on your own is so different than my corporate background. So I'm still trying to kind of find that balance. And maybe it is that I'm just healing before I completely step into this new role, because that's necessary.
Okay, perfect. And I think you just touched on something very important with Gemini Moon story. So you said own your placement, own your personality, own your chart. So this is also something that the psychologists taught in their sessions, like owning our character. So actually both psychology and astrology teach us to own ourselves, face ourselves, right? So that's a great topic that you mentioned. And now I will have the questions to you. First, Frida raises hand, and then I will have the others' questions. Yes, Frida.
Yeah, thank you. So interesting to hear. And I share one placement with you. Uranus close to the ascendant. Only mine is retrograde. So very interesting. I was just so curious because you say that you refer clients to energy. You have somebody you work with who's an energy healer. Sometimes I think to myself, okay, within the field of astrology, therapy, and therapists who are also astrologers, like, is there any way that we could, how to say, connect more or find more cooperation among us? Because I really believe in, instead of like, I mean, many of us, we run our own practices, right? And I don't want to fall into this capitalistic norm where we are going to go against each other. I rather find, how can we empower each other and grow? And what do you think about, for example, referring clients also to other astrologers that, for example, have, I don't know, like Daniel or like me, like another background that could work more, how to say, specified in some kind of way that you identified in your work? Or what do you think about that? Would that be somehow difficult? Or yeah, what are your thoughts?
Times with people that are very close to me, it's hard to give a very unbiased reading, or not even like, I just feel like with my sister, she didn't want to hear this from me. So I was like, here's a list of I mean, I have so many friends, right? That I refer outwards. And if I feel like someone else can do a better job than me on that particular client's chart, kind of maybe coming from me, if I know the person, it's not as constructive. Sometimes, we have to say hard things, like, and as far as referring outward, she's a psychic medium, animal communicator. Everyone's been pretty open to it. You can make recommendations, but you can't make them follow through. And I guess I'm not sure if I'm even saying that right, but that woman that I recommended the self-love challenge, I don't think I gave her the specifics of where to go, how to do it, who to get it from, but I don't think she ever did it. But most people do go get their chakras balanced or energy clearing, because I can see, like, I'm psychic, right? So when I look at the chart, I know exactly, like, I can feel that person's pain sometimes, which is a lot for me, right? So I'm trying to find the balance of kind of not absorbing someone's trauma. But when I see it, I refer them outwards. And I would say about 75% of the time, they do take my advice because they're serious about learning about themselves and they like astrology and they want to do the work. You have to find someone that wants to do the work.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so interesting how you mentioned this, how we can feel in our body, because I have the same when I meet clients a day or so before. Sometimes I get like a hip pain, and then I see something that connects to that in the chart. And I mean, that's why I love it so much also, because this would never be possible to express in like the psychiatric setting for me. Would be totally crazy for them to hear that I have it, like that I experience these things. But I just wanted to connect also to why I ask this is because in my practice, I'm quite specific. Like, I'm a modern astrologer. I do this and this and this. I don't do synastry, for example, just because I'm not interested in it. Like that's something, as soon as a client asks me about about love life and partners, it's like, not really my cup of tea, even though, you know, it's a totally normal subject. I can give generic guidance based on that, but I don't do synastry. So I always look for other astrologers, for example, to collaborate with, that I can refer to. Or, for example, if I had somebody who would be interested in Uranian astrology, I know nothing about that. So then I would have to refer to Matt, you know. So it's so important that we find these connections, because I believe that if we say to a client, okay, go do a synastry reading or a consultation there, and then they will come back to me, or they will, like, we all benefit from creating these connections, I think.
Yeah, and if to answer your question, my pillars are, I define myself as a karmic astrologer, and on my website you can see I offer, you know, natal, solar return. I had a whole career section because of what I went through, right, with being in corporate. And when I quit cold turkey, I announced to everyone, I'm like, I'm starting my own business. I was kind of like evasive about it, but the people that directly asked me, I'm like, yeah, I'm going into astrology. You don't hear that every day. Like an executive saleswoman in big tech just quit her, you know, good paying job to be an astrologer on her own. I owned it. And I was going to set up a whole thing on LinkedIn to connect with all, I mean, think about all the clients I've had through the years that love me. Like I'm a great salesperson, but I'm not ready to do that yet. So I wanted to offer, and I do offer synastry and composite. I'm fascinated by it, but the amount of work that goes into, I like to really understand person A, person B, layer them as synastry, and then look at the composite. And I actually did this for a friend. She was having an issue with her aunt last night, and their sun and moon were exact conjunct. And there was something else in the chart. Sometimes I just directly channel and I go blank. But I said, you know, Colleen, I think she's manipulating you. Like, and Colleen confirmed, she goes, yeah, I've kind of suspected that. So they have this karmic connection that's kind of beautiful, right? The sun and the moon conjunct, but it was the Chiron, Colleen's Chiron in the 9th conjuncted, I forget, with her aunt, but I could pick up on that. But I'm no synastry expert at all, but you know, my intuition can look at a chart and be like, okay, here's the core problem, here's where we need to work, here's the good parts. You know, there's going to be, you know, trines and sextiles that are great, and there's always going to be challenge, right? So
yeah, that's and that's also made me, I'm also looking to connect with astrologers who do like past life consultation, because that's also something that I don't do.
I have a friend, if you want me to, on the side, she's in the United Kingdom. She's excellent. We did a couple sessions and she saw some ancestral blocks in my love life where this couple from the past that I was linked to had this separation, and she brought them together for me during our session while she was working on me. So that was kind of fascinating. But yeah, the past life stuff, sometimes I can tell, like, I was like, oh, you used to be a nun. Like, I can see it sometimes. It's like clear, but that's not my specialty. But people are telling me that I need to go down that route to kind of understand myself a little more. And of course, I'm so psychic. I already kind of know what some of those lives were. And I think I'm a little bit not ready to go down that whole path yet. But obviously I'm getting to that point. And a lot of professional astrologers that I go to, because, you know, you miss stuff on yourself when you're just staring at your own transits, you need to hear it from someone else, have recommended that for me.
Yeah. But
Okay.
is this not perhaps how we can also collaborate more, and how we can bring more therapists into astrology? Like, for example, Daniel, what you mentioned, you want to pursue astrology perhaps more. Could this not be an option then, that we have we are diverse as astrologers, and we recognize that, and we see that, okay, there are some astrologers who do karmic readings and other stuff, and some astrologers that identify something, and then they can transfer also clients to people like you, Daniel, for example, you are like a therapist currently, and you're also looking to maybe go more into astrology, because then you can continue the work that the astrologer began with the client, and just we can help more people.
I'm excited already.
I stopped working with my therapist because she wasn't, like, I would talk about astrology and she wasn't getting it. So, like, personally for me, I would love that. I would be happy to refer my clients out to that. I just think this is going to take a little while because I feel like there's some red tape and you guys know better than me that would have to be hurdled in order to do that. But I'm so open, and I actually need a therapist that would understand that because I haven't been in therapy for a little bit now.
Yeah, okay. So that will be amazing actually, to find a therapist that also understands astrology. Yeah. And also Melina had a question. She raised her hand.
Yeah,
Thank
hi.
you. Hello.
I want to give my feedback as, a client of astrologers. I totally agree with Lauren that we need to work more, work on our charts and not having once per year reading, because sometimes we have some more difficult aspects that we need the help of the astrologer. For example, I had my Saturn return this year, and I had Pluto squaring my Sun on the same time. I think that was the most difficult time of my life because it was happening at the exact same time. And I am at 28 degrees Aries, so it was back and forth all the time. And I had 2 readings, and the astrologers didn't help me with this. They didn't explain me very well what was going on. They had to, search myself what's going on.
Yeah, I mean,
And, I also agree with Frida that sometimes we need to refer people to other astrologers. For example, both of my readings didn't work. And I asked the astrologers, you told me this and this and this, and I know how to understand things because I have, the basic knowledge. And they said, okay, maybe you should wait a little bit. It would be better for me if they would suggest me to look something else, because I am sure that, something is stopping. I don't know how to explain. There is something else. There is another transit, maybe.
it's important. I'm sorry. Go ahead, finish. I just wanted to jump in. Are you, when you're ready? You done?
No, that's it.
I think the Leo King, one of the astrologers, said this, and I'm just going to quote him. And I agree with him. He's like, I could spend 14 hours on one chart, and he's that good. He could. I mean, I don't know if I could spend 14, but yeah, I could spend. But the thing is, like, I like the person to understand who they are natally. Then you layer in the transits. Like, I like to kind of break it down. If you watch any of my Instagrams, people say I'm really good at taking complex things and breaking them down into simplicity for the client, because like when I was on with my astrologer for the first time, like, what's that? What's that? Like, I was so inquisitive because my soul already remembered it. But yeah, for someone to miss, I don't know if they missed the Saturn return or the Pluto square the sun. I mean, that is brutal. I think my father passed when that happened. When Pluto was in Aquarius and my son was in Scorpio. I think I lost my dad. I'd have to get those exact dates up. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yes, I'm sorry you didn't get what you needed. I think sometimes you got to find the right person. And like I always say, and one astrologer said to me, Lauren, don't take my word for it. Go get other astrologers' opinions. And you got to believe, before I quit that corporate job, I hired every astrologer I possibly could to confirm that this was the life path, because that was a big change for me. And then, one day I looked and I could just see it in my chart. I could see the karmic journey of, here's the wounds, here's the Jupiter in the 9th. I'm here to teach. I'm here to be an astrologer. Here's the stellium in Sag, right? Here's the psychic ability in Scorpio. Here's the ability to heal with the moon in the 8th. There was just so many things there that pointed to it for me. So I think for you, it might be finding the right person on that one-off and maybe just getting a quick reading, reading the vibe, and seeing if you want to work with them long term. If that's good advice for you, that's kind of my reco.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that will be good strategy to pick an astrologer, like to first see that if you click together energetically. Yeah, exactly. So, any questions to Lauren? Thank you, Melina. No. Okay, so thank you, Lauren, for being here. And now we can go on with the astrologers. So who wants to go next? Jasmine.
Matt, if I can go, yeah, I have to leave in 10 minutes. My
Okay.
break is done.
Okay. Thank you. So you extended your break for that. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it was really, really interesting to listen to Frida and Daniel and Lauren, I know from the class. So it's always nice to hear her as well. I have been taking notes and it's all over the place. My brain is a Gemini, but just quickly, I want to be time conscious. Astrology has been in my life since I was 11, 12. I think it's around my first Jupiter return. It's been always there. To be honest, I was ashamed to pursue it. So that's another thing that I think many astrologers are facing, shame of doing astrology, because we live in a world when it's not, acknowledged as a profession. So working, I think this topic is amazing, especially psychiatrists, psychologists, all of you guys can really help actually for practice astrology, can help astrology in that way to be more mainstream, more acknowledged, more seen as something that can be helpful to people. So I don't want to label astrology. Is it science? Is it religion? It's a thing of its own. That's how I feel. It has to be a little bit magical as well. We all use intuition, how we see symbols, how we see charts. We need technical knowledge, and I believe that all of us here have the technical knowledge, but there's always something intuitive that tells us, what do we see, how we go from here. My question now here, anyway, should I talk about myself? I don't know. I've been in astrology for a long time. I have been practicing. I came out of the closet like a year and a half ago. I'm still learning, and I'm always going to learn as a true Gemini. My Sun, Moon, and Mercury in Gemini. I'm always going to be a student of astrology, learn many techniques. I'm so happy that I was able to actually learn Uranian astrology, and hopefully I can start. I'm going to do some friends and family first, and then I'm going to start practicing a Uranian because I think it's beautiful. There's many layers. There's many things that we can gain from astrology. What I gained is understanding myself and other people, and it helped me a lot. Just be dealing with everyday situation. It helped me with being a better parent, being a better wife, being a better friend. And that's what I do in my practice. I'm just guiding people. I'm not even giving them advice because I want them to make a decision. I can just, I'm like a true Gemini messenger, translating the language of stars into English or Croatian, whatever the customer is. And then, helping them, empower them, giving them more awareness so they can make better decisions in their lives. We as astrologers, we also have downs and falls. People think, oh, you're an astrologer, you should know better. Like, what does that mean? Like, we also have, bad days, good days. Like, we try to use the best of our knowledge, but you can't. There's circumstances beyond our things. So there's another thing, fate, free will. There's lots of stuff. There's a psychology part of astrology, forecasting. There's so many layers. What I wanted to actually take, because we talked about many things here today, about polarization that Frida mentioned, and then duality, separation, ethics, certifications, where are we going, how we label things. Even psychology is still labeled. Some people, I'm not crazy, I'm not going to a therapy. It's still there. Although it's very mainstream now, it's still out there as something voodoo. I don't want to talk about my dreams, my daddy issues, mom issues. Like, there's a bunch of, these things that we hear in everyday jargon that is just there, like, as you mentioned, narcissist, and then OCD is just thrown away. I don't like it. Oh, he has OCD. It's very serious. Somebody has a serious situation. We just throw these labels into people, into everyday. Anyway, so there's lots of things still that we can work on in psychology, I think, and in astrology, and connecting those things together. Okay. There are, my brain, I hope you can follow my brain, my thoughts. there are some, there are some organizations already, like OPA, like Organization of Professional Astrologer, and ISAR is like an International Society for Astrological Research. So there are some organizations that are trying to, you can get a certificate or be certified, not because of your knowledge. I don't think we need certification just to prove that we know our work. I think maybe we need certification from international organizations that all astrologers kind of acknowledge, just because that people could, because certificates are something that for people work with, right? These days, people understand that. But I also agree with somebody mentioned that I also don't want astrology to lose its magic. So if you get all this, because all these organizations are also very structured, they're very Saturnian, I like to keep, there's astrology is a little bit magical and more Neptunian, intuitive, and stuff like that. So, but if we balance it out, so that's the, in a true Gemini fashion, let's see both sides of the picture, both sides of the coin. How can we, make astrology where it belongs, because this is the ancient, the oldest techniques people used. People were watching at the stars in the beginning of time. The first people, the cavemen, they were like looking up. So this is the knowledge that we have from ever. And because of organization and structures like governments and religions and stuff, everything was suppressed, just because I believe that, not conspiracy theories, but many of those people didn't want us to have the knowledge, so we have to empower ourselves and be, live fulfilled. We just live like we are modern slaves at this point. It doesn't matter. We maybe don't have shackles around our things, but this corporate world, we all escaping in a way. So in that sense, if we can do anything that we can do to help individuals and to help them to be more live their life more fulfilled, that's my goal. And also parents to parent better, to understand their kids better. Anyway, many things. So I hope we can all work together to help astrology to get the place in the world that it deserves. There you go. That's from me.
Okay, thanks so much. That's the perfect manifestation for our goals. Yeah. And as Jasmina is short on time, do you have any quick questions to her or quick comments? Yeah, Frida?
Yes, I just want to say, I'm so thankful for having had the privilege to get to know you, Jasmina. I just want to say that, because you really have the ability to connect people so well, and you're so curious, in your Gemini energy. I love that. I have so much to thank you for on my journey. And I had no idea that you had felt the shame around astrology, and I can really relate to that. So, that opens a lot of, it makes me reflect a lot upon, what you mentioned about society and astrology as a practice that kind of falls outside of the norms of society and everything that comes with that, it's so interesting. And I would like to turn that around also and say that that's also so great, right? What you mentioned about astrology, because that's how we can help people to liberate themselves from like the societal norms, from like the systems that try to keep people in place. And I totally resonate with what you said. I think it's great how you mentioned it, because like that's how astrology has helped me. For example, Uranus on my ascendant. Oh, wow, maybe I am allowed to break a few rules, Maybe that's okay. Maybe that's part of who I should be. Like, it has really helped me to get past these rigid norms. And I think that's also where we come back to ethics and increasing or nurturing the client's agency, because society is so good at keeping us in these boxes, right? So our job, just like you said, is about liberating people from these boxes to a better extent. And that's what therapy does. That's what astrology does. Like, that's so powerful. So thank you for saying that, what you said, really.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you as well for one of the first astrologers on my journey, where we would talk about ethics and astrology, one of my first connections, and I really appreciate it. It gave me such a boost.
That's
it's
when my
brilliant to
baby
know
was
you all.
screaming the whole time.
I love it. I still love it. I think it was authentic. It was the way it's supposed to be. This is, you know, it was really. So I just want to mention as well, as you talked about therapy and lots of stuff, how, you know, approaching using moon signs and stuff. I remember I went to therapy only once in my life. I had after my divorce, I was really depressed and lots of things changed. It was my soul return. I didn't know that much about it back then. I went for therapy. To be honest, I went for 6 months. I don't know what she told me, but she listened. And my Gemini moon just wanted to be heard. Like I felt that she's listening to me, and that was all I needed. I have no idea what she told me as advice, to be honest. I don't know. But what I got from that therapy, so you know, it was just amazing. So there's a lot of things that you guys can do so well and change the world for better. And I'm so excited about the astrology and future and all of us changing the world for a better place. I'm so hopeful. There you go. End of mic drop. I'm not gonna leave. I want to thank you all for everything that I heard today. I'm going to listen to the rest later.
Okay,
Thank
thank you
you so
for
much.
joining. Goodbye. Yeah,
Bye.
bye. All right. So we will also talk about these things with the next astrologer. So it can be Jaymie. Your mic is on. So again, you can introduce yourself a little bit, like, and your practice. And yeah, it's your turn.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Jaymie. My business name is Jaymie Scorpio AF, and I was very intentional and strategic in doing that to break it down in numerology to make it favorable. I have a background in ancient and modern astrology with Vedic, some Babylonian astrology, a lot of focus on psychology, past lives, family karma, vocational astrology, horary astrology. And I like when I first started as an astrologer, I have gone through so many other careers beforehand. I started off as a holistic nutrition coach and then a mindset coach. And something I really didn't find satisfying is that the container of coaching is inherently not designed to be specific as it should be. It just wasn't something that was designed for me. And that's where I really loved astrology, because I'm able to really personalize and give custom tailored insights into what works best for every individual. And that's something that I really love. And just knowing myself and knowing that I've had challenges with marketing, I became very intentional, and I looked at like sustainably, what am I interested in offering, and what are the benefits that the clients are going to get, and finding a way to meet both of those needs. And so a lot of my clients are psychologists, they are therapists, nurses, they have sort of a med background, and my chart does show indicators that I had a medical background in previous incarnations as well. So I had a bit of a faster learning curve with that. And for that reason, I just sort of gravitated towards a lot of psychologically inclined services. I was in early ADHD diagnosis, which is unheard of. And so I'm very much like a neurodivergent. And so I've had to, like, I've spent so much time, effort, and energy being discouraged, not getting the results that everyone else is getting, only to realize I was using methods that weren't designed for me. So this is where I really want to support my clients. Is I'm less about like future predictions and stuff. When I did offer that, it was more future insights, because the reality of the matter is, like, there's what's best for us within the astrological signs, like stars, what most supports us versus what we want to do, what our karma is, our environment. So I like to provide tools so that people can make an empowered decision. That's sort of like my perspective. And a lot of my readings, I look at it from the perspective of psychology, and as a woman of color, there are certain things where I know that I'm treated differently. And so I like to understand, I use specific systems that are better designed for that. Like, and I'm American, and I've had to learn the hard way that in the US, unfortunately, the level of math that we're taught isn't advanced enough to really properly understand astrology in a very technical, mathematical, accurate sort of a way. So I've had to kind of rearrange that. So there's certain methods where I use like the whole house system over Placidus, because of the way the sky gets split up in the sky geographically, depending on where a client was born. It's not necessarily the most reliable, but it is beautiful if they're in geographical range to get a sense of who you are psychologically. But for myself, I know that the way I perceive things isn't necessarily how the rest of the world is operating. So I like to use other systems that reveal more of what's most likely to materialize, combine a lot of different things. And I just have placements in my charts where it's very much about connecting with psychological clients. I don't want to get into it too much to make it too technical, but I do have a Scorpio stellium, which is when you have 3 or more planets in a single zodiac sign, you take on the energy of that sign. I have a strong 8th house. I'm water dominant, very karmic planet, like 4th, 8th, and 12th house activations. In my chart, it's really interesting. I had to learn kind of advanced astrology because my chart didn't really resonate with me. Like my moon is in Libra, but it's not, the degree is like it categorically is classified as being a via combusta, so it functions more like it's in Scorpio. So there's just a lot of things that I've sort of learned about myself along the way. And I feel like oftentimes, like whether it's due to conditioning or misunderstanding or programming, whatever it is, sometimes we navigate our lives in a way that's not necessarily the most favorable for us. So the way I read the chart is I always look at like your rising sign, the best way for you to navigate your life. Are you using the methods that ultimately support you? Because oftentimes, sometimes I feel like when we're out of gear, I recognize I'm like, oh, I'm operating out of this other placement that isn't necessarily the best because of self-sabotage tendencies or whatever that is. So I look at those things and I would say, I mean, I have a number of different readings, but I think the ones that really are very powerful is Jaymie Scorpio AF and You're a Badass Energy Bitch, which are based on like Scorpio stellium trauma-based readings, as well as people who struggle with boundaries. And the You're a Badass Energy Bitch was a adaptation of what I offered in my coaching program. So I know that it's like worked really well. And I had this philosophy that because Scorpio and Aquarius rule astrology, I like to combine those things, being psychological, but also being technical, making sure that I understand the techniques and stuff because I'm very psychic, and like Scorpio is a psychic sign and I have Aquarius in a psychic house. So I have those things, but I also want to make sure that it's something that is astrologically valid as well. And Sagittarius rules astrologers, so you blend all of those things. And so in my mind, I was very much like, I want to create unique concepts because Scorpio, Aquarius, Sagittarius are very unique. And so finding something that resonates, I think, is so important because there are so many wonderful astrologers. And my big thing is, I think so many people want to feel understood and validated, that there are some readings that are amazing, and then there are some readings where I feel bad for people because they're like, this was such a great reading, and it's like there's a difference between feeling understood and feeling seen and actually getting useful, usable information. Like my philosophy is that like I want you to be able to feel seen, and also like at the end of a reading for anyone, I believe that like it's important to know, okay, well, what can I do with this information? How can I get started so that people are empowered? I think, and doing it in a way that's sustainable, recognizing that life gets in the way. What is the best way to navigate that? That's sort of a philosophy of mine and something I really want to share because I think this is really important. And I would love to get Frida and Daniel's take, and Matt, your take on this as well as like the participants who have gone to therapy. Is the way I see things psychologically is that Scorpio rules trauma triggers, trauma loops, trauma healing. And the next zodiac sign is always the resource of the previous sign. So the sign after Scorpio is Sagittarius. And what I find interesting is that Scorpio is the only zodiac sign that can transmute its element. And in my opinion, so it's like it's a water sign, but it can transmute and it's very fiery because it's ruled by Mars traditionally. But it's also, my opinion, the zodiac sign that has the most access to the rest of the elements. It's very strategic, like which is an air thing, very like intellectual. And it says it's not an earth sign, but it magnetizes other people's earths. So it uses the resources. And so I think that there's a lot that you can do working with this scorpionic energy, but I think I think we normalize traumas and we don't realize certain things. And I just think it's so interesting because, you hear different sayings like, you've got to heal your icy Scorpio heart, or, you got to melt it because it's ruled by frozen water. And so I've come across so many clients, people. I was like this at one point where we're just like, I've processed my traumas. I don't know why things aren't working out and stuff. And people have a trauma response. and solution based on thinking like, I don't know, an analogy would be like, I worked on my traumas, but every relationship I've had has been crappy. So I'm meant to be alone, kind of a thing, you know? And the thing that I find really interesting is that because Scorpio rules traumas and they're also represented by icebergs, the iceberg, I think it's like, I looked it up and it was like 5 degrees to negative 4 degrees Fahrenheit and stuff. So you can't really be under there for so long. And so I feel like in order to heal, using that energy of Sagittarius is really valuable in order to really kind of like see the higher perspective of things using astrology as a guidance. And that's where I feel like this session is just so amazing, is that we're literally using the resource of psychology, which is astrology, which is astrologers and stuff. And it's something that I just really like. And it's so interesting because something that I've observed is that when people get to that side of Sagittarius, when you're using derivative houses and you count from Sagittarius all the way to Scorpio, Scorpio becomes 12 houses away. So that's healing, letting things go. And so when that happens, our traumas should be a little bit more hazy and confusing and, you know, like activating the positive manifestations of the 12th house, which Jasmina mentioned when she said when she was in therapy and she healed, she was like, I don't actually remember what the therapist said, you know? And so I just think it's really interesting. And this is where, for me, I really love astrology and being able to help people, because I think psychology is so beautiful, but I think a lot of people are using it in a way that's not best for them. And so I think this is where astrology is just such an amazing consultation, and it's helped me so much in my life. And so I love just being able to share it with others. And I feel like we all have a way to contribute. And I feel like in the world that we live in, so many people are like, I think up until I discovered astrology and became a part of this community, I didn't realize how lacking or limited collaboration is, because in astrology, like, we know our strengths, we know our weaknesses, but we don't let our weaknesses kind of get in the way, because we know, like, okay, there are some ways to correct this, or you know what, we can get someone else to help with this, because astrology with Aquarius is inherently very collaborative. So I love how candid it is, where we can be like, oh, here are my insecurities. This is something that I'm not good at, but this is where I can delegate. This is where I can refer out. This is where there's a collab. And I feel like astrology is just such a way where we bring that together, because in this modern world, we're so separated that we don't have the community. And I feel like that's where there's so many struggles, and why I learned both ancient and modern astrology, because we live in a modern world. So modern astrology is relevant for modern times, but also understanding why something is true, because it's all of this was derived from ancient astrology. So I want to get to the root of it. Why is this true? And I think that's so important when anybody is working with an astrologer or becoming an astrologer yourself. There's a lot of misinformation and people don't know, because they don't look at like why something is true. And I feel like developing that mindset is so important. And I've started teaching for that reason. And I just feel like this is where I really like learning ancient astrology, because when you understand why something is true, you know, you get more insights, more depth, and then we can make more informed decisions about the concepts that exist in astrology, to recognize like, okay, does that apply in modern times? Some of it is antiquated, some of it still applies. It depends on the individuals. You know, I look at some charts and I can tell like, okay, like this person might do better with Vedic, this person might do better with the modern chart reading. And so I'm able to adapt. So I like to collect as much knowledge as I can. I know everyone has different philosophies with astrology. And one of the reasons why I wanted to collaborate with you, Matt, is because so many of the people that you bring in your philosophy, like some astrologers are very rigid and they're like, this is the only way to do things. And I think that that's ridiculous. Like, I think that defeats the whole purpose of what astrology is. Like, there are billions and billions of fucking people, and not one system is best for everyone, you know? And like, there are timing techniques that are like more accurate sometimes, yes, but like sometimes I favor like a psychological approach, which is inherently a little bit more subjective, because it's like, do I want to be more precise, or do I want to provide insights for someone? Someone wants to be understood, you know? If you want to feel understood, that's a subjective realm. So this is where I feel like psychology and astrology can be such a beautiful blend, because life is more than just math and numbers. and life is more than just
Exactly.
psychology.
Yeah, exactly. So you touch on very good topics. So I just want to give my own reflection, and then I will give words to everybody if they want to comment. So first, as an astrologer, like it's amazing that we can learn through different branches of astrology, different philosophies of astrology. For example, I studied modern astrology, karmic astrology, classical astrology, Uranian astrology. So I also know horary, for example. And in my practice, I can combine all of these things. So I also like kind of synthesize my background to offer people personalized service. So what they need, what they want to know, what they want to know about themselves. So if they want to get a psychological reading, I make use of more karmic astrology knowledge, for example. And if they want to get more specific things, I use Uranian astrology. Or like if they want to learn about daily life and like career work, I use modern astrology, for example. So that's the good thing, that we can personalize ourselves and then we can offer personalized services. So, and to limit that, I think that will be pretty blocking for us. So that's the great thing about the astrology, the working like profession of astrology. So that's my first comment that I will give to you. And the second is like Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Aquarius, like they are known to be associated with astrology, of course. And so, and of course, like when, for example, I read charts, I take a look at Scorpio house and 12th house, 8th house. So this gives us some depth regarding trauma, psychology, especially if the client needs some type of psychological like information or psychological insight. And for that, what's funny is that I will use Jasmina's quote. So in our class, she talked about some of her traumatic experience, and then she said, "Oh, now I can laugh about it." So when we like analyze the zodiac, Scorpio trauma, Sagittarius fun. So after some time, like when I look at the things that I had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, my traumas back then, like they were so hilarious. So now I can laugh at them. So this is also the transformation of zodiac, and this is also how psychiatry, psychology, and astrology transforms you. So like you can kind of have a different perspective on yourself, on your trauma, and on your personality. So that's a very great experience, and great that you brought that up. So that's my two comments. And now Frida raises hand, so you can.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that because I love how you make this connection from like trauma or Pluto. I think about Pluto as a modern astrologer, and then I think about Jupiter, Scorpio, Sagittarius, and I even in my work, in my book, for example, I connect Pluto to post-traumatic growth. That's the scientific concept. And I connect Jupiter to growth mindset. And there, from my perspective, we can see the scientific connection here between like our symbolism of astrology and psychological research, where we see that, okay, there is a possibility, not to diminish those traumatic experiences in any way, but there is a way for us to somehow look at our traumatic experiences and create meaning, right? Sagittarius or Jupiter, meaning that can make us grow. And it's all there in the science. So it's very interesting how that reflects like and how that mirrors each other.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up. And I didn't realize this, but until you were talking, and I was like, oh my God, I think I manifested you, because I do this thing where I naturally translate everything to astrology. So sometimes even when I'm talking and I'm really psychic, I used to see like not always visual colors, but I might see like a black aura around someone's head, right? And then over time, I realized, oh, that like afterwards, I'll be like, oh, that person has Saturn in Aries, or, you know, Saturn on their, I don't know, like 10th house or something to that effect, right? And I started realizing like these connections. So I have a tendency, whenever I read or see anything, I always see the astrological interpretation of it. And so like with like the attachment theories, or, you know, like with the nervous system regulations, I always do that. So I love the way you said that, because I remember thinking like, man, I wish, it's one of these things where people are always like surprised and fascinated by the insights that I make. And I'm not saying they're not impressive, but a part of me is also like, I've given you guys the cheat sheet. You can do the same thing. Like, just match the definition with a planet kind of a thing. And I'm just like, man, I wish there were books, because whenever I think of like self-help books or whatever, I always see the astrological equivalent of it. And that's where I can recognize like, oh, this might work better for one client more than the other and stuff like that. So, and I definitely resonate with the Jupiter being the growth mindset. And I forgot to mention that when people talk about you need to like melt and heal your traumas, you know, from the Scorpio perspective, I see it as using the fire from Sag energy to do that. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and I'm so excited for your book. When is it coming out?
Next year. It's
Oh,
just sent
yeah.
now for copy editing, so next year. And yeah, Sweden is not really a primary market, as you all understand, because they're not so open to these kind of things here. So primary America, Northern America. Yeah.
That's way too long for me to have to wait. I'm so sick and tired of the universe forcing me to practice patience. But anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Frida. And any questions to Jaymie? Anybody? Or any comments? No. Mia? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm very happy to be here with you,
Welcome.
because I know how important it is to have a good reading for a good astrologer. I had several readings with several astrologers, and I saw that there are different levels of depth, all of them. And when I had my first two readings with two Romanian astrologer, I was a bit disappointed, because it was like a superficial reading, and I knew, I felt in my heart that is not enough for me. I want more. I know there's a lot more to say. And now when I see everyone talking about their experiences and so much knowledge that you have, for me, going to having a good reading with a good astrologer is like making sure you go to the best doctor and to get the best treatment you can have. So I think I want a reading with all of you now.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you said that, Mia. And I think that that's true. And one of the things that I do, because like for me, it's like like mutual support is beneficial, is important to me. So I don't want to just offer a reading. Like, you know, I'm not responsible for how clients choose to read it, but there's so many people in the world. I'm like, I only want to give readings to people who are gonna benefit from it. And my thing is, I think this is where clients benefit from learning a little bit about their own, like just a certain rudimentary understanding of astrology, just to be able to like make an informed decision. And so, you know, I'd mentioned like Aquarius, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Pisces also rules astrological guidance. And so this is where I tie it in with what Frida said, with Jupiter representing the growth mindset, is that there are levels to astrologers. And so someone can accurately analyze something, but if they don't have the growth mindset, if they don't have the innovation, in my opinion, which is like really developing the Sagittarius, you know, being able to use that information, the level isn't necessarily going to be as valuable. And so whenever unless I'm like looking at someone's work and I'm familiar, and, you know, I'm now at a place where I can just kind of gauge things without looking at someone's chart. And not every astrologer is going to show you their chart, but even just knowing your own chart, like when I consider whether I want to hire someone or not, I'm looking at like how are their Scorpio, Aquarius, Sagittarius, and Pisces developed, because that tells me, are you more psychologically inclined? Are you more mathematically, technically inclined? Do you have a growth mindset? Do you weave it all together with wisdom through astrological guidance? And each sign is going to show you that, as well as the houses that correlate to those signs. And also like their Mercury, are they a good communicator? Some astrologers have a lot of great knowledge, but they don't communicate it clearly. Or it may be that they don't communicate it clearly with you because of whatever connection that you and someone may have, versus like someone else that, you know, you have a much better connection with. And also, like, I encourage clients to look at like, where is your Mercury? Where is your sun? Where is your, you know, look at your ninth house. Ninth house tells you the type of astrologer that you're interested in. What type of reading do you want to get? Is it business? That's your 10th house. Is it your own business? Is it your entrepreneur? Is it your relationship? That's your 5th house. You're looking at past lives reading. That's your 4th, 8th, 12th house. And I don't expect you to get into all of this. I'm just, kind of going down the rabbit hole here, but getting an idea of like what it is that you want, what's most important by understanding certain things in your chart, and then kind of evaluating, is this astrologer that I'm considering the best person to give me that reading based on their placement? And also understanding for yourself, like, what is your communication style? Your Mercury, your 3rd house placement, as well as your moon, how you take in information. Like someone can be really great, but there's got to be compatibility there, and so this is where I've noticed that it's an interesting thing. Like our nervous system is wired to be comfortable with with our current settings, essentially. So when we try to go beyond that, the reptilian part of our brain is like, everything we've done so far has kept us alive. So it kind of can keep us trapped and stuff. And we have to kind of slowly and safely regulate our nervous system to do things so we don't traumatize ourselves. And so this is where I was very intentional and like emphasizing like, hey, I'm a Scorpio stellium astrologer, Scorpio astrologer, so that people get a sense of my energy. So the right people who are ready are going to get those readings. And something I've noticed is that sometimes the more beginner level astrologers might get more clients because it's more digestible. It feels a little bit less scary, and so I think that's where sometimes astrologers will get a lot of publicity. But then, I don't know what your placements are, but I'm assuming you're here. There's probably some significant, strong Scorpio, Pluto,
I have a
something deep.
Cancer Sun, rising Pisces rising, Virgo Moon. The Pluto is in Scorpio in my 8th house, so it's very powerful because it's aspecting basically all my planets. And I have a North Node in Aquarius in the 12th house.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm adjusting it a little bit. Where were you born?
In Romania,
Okay.
1989. Yeah.
Okay. Because
I have
in my
a
mind,
Sagittarius midheaven, so yeah.
oh, there you go. Oh, hey. Because in my mind, when you said Pisces rising, I'm using the whole house system. So I'm like, okay, like Libra in the 8th house, but then I'm like, okay, Scorpio in the 8th house, psychologically how you process that. Okay, that makes sense. So it's like, it's really interesting. Like someone like you, I think you're definitely going to want something very like deep and profound, and so with someone with your placement, I would say Pisces rising, like the best way for you to navigate your life is going to be Piscean in nature. So like getting a reading from someone who has really blended their Pisces, which is about astrological wisdom, is going to be really beneficial. And the best way for you to process traumas, which psychologically there's the Scorpio in the 8th house, but also in the whole house system, having Libra in your 8th house, having your moon in the sign that is the most critical, your feelings, So it's like you might do well processing. I mean, this is obviously very general, but like someone receiving information, we're like getting constructive, like feedback, like, I don't know, you're reminding me of someone that I've met online who is very much like, I want to get an A+ in therapy. And so I show up every week and I want actionable steps, and I got vibe checked because my therapist was like, I'm a therapist, not a business coach. Like those are the things that I kind of think of. But just like, there's so many great astrologers, and it's really a matter of like what works best for every individual, and like your sun being in Cancer, it's like the way that you express yourself is really Cancerian, and it makes sense that you're resonating with me because I'm a Cancer rising. My sun is in Pisces. I have a Scorpio stellium, and my moon is in Libra. So it's all of those things, and it's like, it's as you get to know yourself, it's like even if you don't know someone's chart, like we start to know there's clues, like, there's so many ways that can manifest, but there's clues of like, okay, that connects with me. But essentially I would say just in general, like Mercury, how you learn, how you communicate, your sun, what energizes you, your moon, how you receive information, your 9th house tells you a story of like the astrologer that you like. I think these are things that like, I think I've made a video on giving recommendations on how people can find the best astrologers, and I feel like that's a really big thing. So
Yeah, okay,
I'm
I agree with that.
invested.
Yeah, thank you. So, and for the wrap up for the question, like before, when I first emailed the clients, like I asked them about their background on astrology. Some of them don't know anything about it, so I just explain the reading without using technical terms of astrology. Some of them want to know why I say something, so for that reason, I explain why I say things. And funny is that, Jaymie, like I have 9th house in Capricorn, and almost 80% of my clients have Capricorn rising, Capricorn sun. And they are so technical, like they want to know why. They want to know the reasoning. They want to know like the structure. So that's why like they kind of are drawn to me. So you were pretty right on that. So thank you so much for that. Yeah. Okay, so any other questions to Jaymie? If not, we will go on with Marc. No. Okay, thank you so much, Jaymie, for being here. You offered lots of insight. Thank you so much. And now Marc, and let me introduce him. He has been my student for 2 years, and like I think whatever he does, he will do it amazingly. And he also has very special placements. I know his chart very well. So I've been telling him he hasn't started like professional business yet, but I'm sure he will do great. So now, Marc, it's your turn.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. I really appreciate being here and to offer this space with everyone. Everyone's very educated within their realm, so it's awesome to hear all these great minds come together. But yeah, so astrology is really close to my heart. It's something super beautiful just to understand the self and the people around you, and it's just a really interesting concept. Something that I recently have been trying to understand, and I think this will kind of lead me into my professional services, is, well, whereas I'm hoping to become an astrologer and read other people, I also come with the energy after certain readings where I feel like there's a merging of energy with the person that I'm encountering their chart with. So I think in synastry or in other studies of astrology, they mentioned how, like, you know, when you meet with another soul of some type, like their energy kind of lights up within your chart. So we have a lot of Gemini energy in this recording, as well as Scorpio energy. So I'm sure a lot of those houses are being lit up within our charts today. So I just think when we're moving the dial of astrology and psychology, it'll be very interesting to see how that realm also gets, you know, worked within, is how astrologers or therapists are able to choose their clients based on astrological placements, and like how that can also work within one another. So it's very beautiful, very awesome to be able to share this space and to be able to learn so much and to just kind of get like a drop of what can be within this realm of information.
Yeah, thank you so much. So you actually touch upon the topics like we can kind of leave someone to continue with someone else. Like we can combine all fields and all like knowledge that we internalized yet. Okay.
Yeah, because there's definitely been times where we've been in class for Matt, and Matt's talked about a certain subject or a certain placement within our charts, and classmates of mine or even myself, like we've said like, oh, it's funny that you're mentioning this because this is energy that's came up for me this past week, or this is something that's come up for me, you know, the week after we just talked about this. So it's interesting to see how therapists or astrologers can have like this flashlight of information or knowledge and be able to spark it within other people too. So in terms of healing or in terms of uncovering like past life regression or anything like that, it's really impactful.
Exactly. So like when I was getting astrology classes, like my professor used to read my chart as well. And like sometimes it will click so well, like I could not believe it. Like it was 100% accurate. Sometimes like he would say amazing things like I wouldn't believe that they were going to happen. He basically described like all or a few good things that happened to me, like which were kind of my blessings. But when I watch the recordings now, like I'm again so surprised because I was kind of, let's say, skeptical that it will happen to me. Of course, like that's the one thing that I cannot read my own chart. When I read for people, like I can warn them or I can give them kind of good heads up for some good things that might happen to them. But when I read my own chart, I can be skeptical to myself. So it's also one of the aspects that like you can get help from someone, like you can get help from an astrologer or psychologist that will show you yourself in a way that you are. Yeah, thank you. And any comments on this topic or any questions to Marc? Daniel?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Marc if it's gonna take still a long time before he goes on with his astrological practice, and if not, what is the process to becoming a professional astrologer?
Yeah, well, I definitely could see myself coming into providing services for astrology. Just in the creation of it, I think what I'm hoping to brainstorm or kind of come together is how those services will look like. In the past, I've read other people's charts, and sometimes you'll see charts or chart sessions with people. They'll say like, oh, it's an hour session. But the way I see, or the way that my readings have gone before, it definitely takes like a day, even a week to process a whole chart. Just because sometimes some people's energy can stay with you, or like you'll just think about their chart like a week later and be like, oh, this is something I want to share with them too. So I think the way that I'm hoping to build my model of services would be something of like, if I'm taking on a client, I'm hoping to take them on for a couple weeks or a process of a transit or something. So then that way I can kind of get a better understanding, and then the experience of working with an astrologer would also be beneficial for them, and they would feel like they're being seen, heard, acknowledged, and this is being meaningful for them.
All right. So, and to be professional, you just need to kind of step up and jump into the water, and then like you
Yeah,
will
that's
learn how
true.
to kind of survive and like transform and evolve at the same time. Like on the way, you will also get to know yourself, get to know your services that you enjoy giving, and you will kind of find your identity as an astrologer as well once you start doing it. Yeah.
And I just
Okay.
want to pop like Marc,
Yeah.
I was like analysis paralysis. Like I had the logo, I trademarked it, I was ready to go, and I just couldn't do it. And then I had booked the pop-up event. So I was like, okay, like if I'm doing an event, I have to promote it. Once I ripped off the Band-Aid and started it, it was much easier than the anxiety of, oh my God, when is it going to be time? So I'm happy to help you. Obviously, we know each other. So
Yeah,
just
no, this type of meeting session is exactly what I need to get into it. It's the baptism by fire, just jumping straight in and just ready to go. So I appreciate this space for that creation.
Perfect. Like as I
I'm
as I
sorry,
always
Matt.
tell you, you will do amazingly.
I'm sorry, Matt, and
Yeah.
everyone. Sorry, but I'm gonna have to leave. It's bedtime here in Sweden for my kids, so I'm going to
Okay.
have to tend to them. So sad that I have to jump out of the session, but just want to send you all my regards and my thanks and everything. It was lovely connecting with you all, and I hope we will continue to connect also after this session. I
Yeah.
leave all my details in our chat. So.
Okay.
Sorry that I have to go, but
Yeah. No
kids are
problem. So thank
the.
you for being here. Yeah.
Thank you
Goodbye.
so much, everyone. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Frida.
you.
Thank you, Frida. All right. So yeah, Jaymie also raises her hand for Marc.
Yes. So there are two things I wanted to mention. One, I think it's amazing that you've taken the time to kind of think about how you want to do the reading. I feel like there's a reason why Matt, and I'm sorry, I forgot your other name, the corporate America, had
Lauren.
mentioned, what is it?
Lauren.
Lauren. Hi, Lauren. Sorry. And so I think it's interesting that they mentioned, like you got to jump in. It's like maybe there's like a reason why, that energy is in there. But I also think it's so beautiful that you've taken the time to be like really intentional and being able to be like, I want to work with them for a little bit longer for the energy to kind of resonate. Like, regardless of how you choose to unfold that, what I love about astrology is that unlike a traditional job, we don't have to conform to like the existing structures and guidelines, and we get to create what works best for us. And I think that's so beautiful. A question I did have for you is you mentioned that you're one of Matt's students, and Matt had mentioned that like he isn't like as like into like or not into, but like I think you said that like your experience with psychology isn't as extensive. But I was wondering if like you learned Uranian astrology from Matt and how you find that it combines with astrology. I mean, I'm sorry, with psychology. And I asked because I'm not familiar with Uranian astrology. I haven't taken his course yet, but there has been this interesting fascination of a lot of Vedic astrologers find that Uranian astrology is very like mathematically, like timing wise, very good, like accurate timing techniques and stuff. So I feel like there's a similarity, and Vedic in some ways aren't psychological, and in some ways it is. So I kind of wanted to know how you experienced Uranian astrology, and if you do happen to also have Vedic astrology, like how, I guess basically like, did you find a connection between psychology and Uranian astrology, and what was that experience like? Like, how do you see the two, and does that question make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that within the Uranian astrology, the psychology of a Uranian astrology was more archetypal. I would say that the way that you're looking at and reading and interpreting someone's chart is based on a lot of the mythology and the legends or stories of archetypes of goddesses or Greek, Roman mythology. And I believe even in the Uranian astrology, there's also some other cultural factors as well. Like there's the asteroid Shiva and I can't think of any ones off the top of my head, but there's other cultural factors that I think the archetypes do play a big role in the understanding. So within the psychology of it, I think the symbolism of looking at those stories and being able to kind of understand them and how those can affect somebody definitely play like a good factor of analyzing and understanding somebody's chart.
Just to pop into, the Uranian dial, I find it complicated, but extremely, extremely accurate. And every Sunday when Matt reads me as the astrologer reading the student at that point, the same themes always come up in different ways, in different asteroids on the Uranian dial. So he'll be like, we know that your mother died, but we see it on this way and we see it this way. And, we know that you had self-love or values or lack of value for yourself. We see it. So it's like, it's interesting because he does it on whole sign, which, we all know we're students, the Uranian dial, a little intimidating at first, but then like you start to connect the dots and it really helps. And he had done a solar return chart reading for me. He saw, Matt.
Solar return chart for you? Was it Matt?
Yes.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
And he saw, it was so weird because my birthday's in November. And then the incident didn't happen until June. Obviously, it was a solar return. But he said, keep every email at work. You're going to be questioned. Like, there were specifics that he gave. Like, I still have the reading, and it's, no longer relevant because it's a solar return. But I go back and listen, and I'm like, how accurate he was. So then I became a student.
I love that. Thank you both for sharing, because I think that's the big thing is why I combined ancient and modern, is that I think modern astrology has value, but sometimes it's been derived and convoluted and it gets mixed up and it just kind of loses its meaning in certain things. And like something might make sense in theory, but when you look at the mythology, when you look at like the origin, you're just like, well, that got kind of twisted. So I feel like I've had to do a lot of my own personal labor untangling what is relevant, what isn't relevant, where things got lost in communication. So it makes sense now that you're explaining it, because so much of what I've had to untangle with like modern astrology that don't work is having to look at those origin, that myth and stuff like that. So it's like, oh, modern Uranian astrology already does that. So now I'm just like, damn, I could save myself so much time and energy if I had just jumped into Uranian astrology, because it would have done all the work for me. But that's great. Thank you, Matt, for sharing that. And then Lauren, I appreciate you kind of giving an example, because yeah, I was intuitively very drawn to Uranian astrology, and my chart is very well aspected for Uranian astrology and stuff. But I was also just really like, because I know very little about Uranian astrology, I was like, how is it tied to Vedic? I'm like, I know Vedic, but I don't, and it was just, that makes so much sense. So now I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So you don't have to be afraid, like I explained very simply and understandably. And also like it's not really that related to Vedic. So it's still Western astrology, modern Western astrology. So yeah, but it's a different system. Yeah, you were right on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know
Yeah.
it's a different system, but I love that like people say Vedic, like the fact that they say Uranian astrology is so comparable in timing accuracy to your Vedic.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's fucking impressive.
Exactly. I'm proud of that. And Melina, we're raising your hand.
Yes, I wanted to add this. Being a Greek is easier for her, to understand the quality of an asteroid because we already know it's a fun fact actually. We already know the mythology because of the school. So for me, it's easier to understand what is doing this asteroid. For example, Pallas, Juno, everything is easier for every Greek, I think.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
don't
you
have to study a lot.
yeah.
Mhm.
For example, you will do great in my astrology asteroid class, like you already know these things internally. So that will
Yes,
be
for
great.
example, Bacchus.
Yeah.
We already know that it was the god of orgies, of alcohol, of everything. We don't have to remember an extra information.
Yeah, that's a good
Oh,
point.
you like the load of our memory bank? That is such a great thing. Oh my God. See, I'm so glad. I love you, Matt, but I find your students to be so much more helpful in giving these insights because I'm learning about it from the student perspective. I'm like, because I've never heard you once be like, and I think it would sound a little weird coming from the astrology teacher, like the way I teach, you don't have to like strain yourself with remembering as much information, but the way you said that, Melina, like that was so helpful. Thank you. I love that.
Thank you,
Yes,
Melina.
this is how I connect everything in my mind regarding the planets.
Yeah, thank you. And any other comments for Marc and Melina? No. Okay, so an important part. I think the most important part of the session, we will have the experience of the participants. Like they got therapy and they got astrology readings, and like they are into both fields and they benefited from both fields. And now I want to hear your experience and how all that we talk reflected on you. Okay, so now that Nick has never talked so far, like I want to start with him. So thank you for being here, Nick, and you can just introduce yourself.
Of course, yeah, thank you. So I should start by saying that I'm a tarot reader. And I came to reading tarot because of in a lot of ways the self-work that I began to do through psychology. That when I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and so there's a rich tradition of kind of intellectuals merging with spirituality, and growing up in that, in my childhood, in my family, there was mental illness, and I lost my mother at a young age. And so one of the things that brought me to seeing a therapist and going to counseling was kind of processing and dealing with that. As I aged and I developed my own personal spirituality, what I found was that in my youth, my understanding of myth and archetype was sort of missing from the work that I was doing in my therapy and my psychology sessions. And what I found is that connecting for me, reading tarot cards was a really helpful way for me to kind of combine what I was doing in my sessions with working with a therapist and sort of have a kind of personal journaling and reflecting on, say, some of the themes in a more sort of mythical, archetypal kind of way. As that developed, I was soon enough introduced in a kind of richer way to astrology. And in the last 4 or 5 years, it's like I've jumped off the deep end and just been really enjoying connecting and layering these things. And so for me, I think initially my understanding with psychology was kind of, or with working with a therapist, was a lot of conversation around was a lot of sort of working it out in a mental sphere, kind of going into my history of what had happened, retelling a story, a lot of narrative work. And I think as I have kind of deepened into tarot and now kind of am picking up more and more tools with astrology, the richness of the narrative that I create has really just, it's like the colors are coming in, the scene is deepening. It's multidimensional in new ways for me. And so I think as I work as a tarot reader, a lot of what I'm doing when I'm working with people, and I think there's a lot of like really important points that I could connect with what we've talked about, but I think the thing that kind of has really resonated with me is understanding as an astrologer or as a reader, as kind of sometimes being a guide. And this is also something that I think Daniel, you talked on, is like showing people the path and them having the choice, or the things that come up in these sessions of, we can show you maybe where you could go, but you have to go there. And it's kind of your option. And I think in a lot of ways, when I'm working with clients in a reading, it happens where I'm saying, the option for therapy is very open. And I think this is actually where what work maybe they and I are doing, or maybe in an astrologer's reading, that's the connection of saying, you know, this is an available avenue. And that's how kind of the two work in tandem, of someone who's interested maybe in working on themselves in a certain modality, can find that astrology and psychology can go hand in hand in that regard. So my experience personally has been to really have, so I'm very lucky in the sense that I actually am one of, I'm a person whose therapist, or the person that I worked for, ran my chart. And we actually worked together. And what's really interesting is he's a gentleman who was initially a naturopath, but in kind of the San Francisco Bay Area, I think there's a tradition of people who have, and this tradition began in the 60s, of people who were intellectuals coming from maybe psychology, moved into maybe more spirituality, and then figured out ways to kind of braid or weave the two. There's a tradition well, there's a school called the CIIS, Center for Institute of Integral Studies. And so for me, my initial understandings of psychology led me to kind of have more of a nature connection. And then I moved into kind of understanding eco-psychology. I found a gentleman named Ralph Metzger, who was wrote quite a bit and taught at these schools. And that, you know, kind of, it was like a stepping stone to one to another, one to another. And so that's kind of why I think I'm most interested in talking about what that conversation looks like between astrologers and psychologists. And that's why I've joined here. And so, yeah, I think that kind of encapsulates where I'm coming from, my experience. But what I'm finding is that a lot of work that I'm doing personally is now taking both of these fields and just layering them. And I am still seeing a therapist, and I am still I'm kind of layering astrologers now. And like we've all talked about, you can have different people. I like to use the analogy of like, it's almost like when a race car driver has a team, you know, you pull in for the pit stop, like these are all your practitioners. It's like you have all these people who you work with in different ways. And it's like, oh, let's check the brakes. Oh, let's check the engine. Oh, let's check this. And you don't really know necessarily how these folks are going to work with you until, you know, until like kind of the way Marc talked about, until they put their flashlight on you, until you kind of layer that part. And I think that's a really interesting part of this kind of work, but also the challenge of the internet and connecting with people through the internet, is not understanding how you're going to merge or weave or you know, correspond with someone. And that's why I'm so thankful for this platform too, because I feel like we are able to share so much more with our video than we unfortunately have to fit it into 10 seconds or one, you know, slide or story. So yeah, so I think that connection and that layering is what, with all this Gemini we have right now, we're so hungry for and we want to do. So yeah, so that's my connection from it. And I'm very inspired by what all of you said, and I've been taking lots of notes, and yeah, all my chart's activated. So thank you.
Yeah, that's the point. Like we get activated by each other, and yeah, and you also like touch upon the things that we have discussed yet. So we combine and we offer personalized services, and we personalize our services first, and we have an understanding and philosophy, and we kind of click with people. So and understand archetypes, and tarot is actually like deep psychological and or deep unconscious reading, as I saw,
Yeah.
rather than talking about future. I see it like the map of someone's mind
Yeah.
for tarot with symbolism. So, and it's a pretty deep topic, and you also are interested in astrology. So, and your therapy background at the same time offers some depth, I believe, to your services or to your understanding of astrology at the same time.
Yeah.
Right.
One more thing to kind of add is I think where I see sort of the future of psychology, astrology, and perhaps tarot too is research grants and funding and foundations that have capital for people that are doing the type of research that's necessary to kind of have astrologers in an academic setting explain to a psychological community what it is they do, and have psychologists, I think, help to train, in some cases, astrologers in best practices, how they are conveying things. That, I think, for me, that's what I've kind of seen with psychology. One of the things that's very helpful is that in therapy and psychology, people have to go through 700 hours, 1,000 hours of sessions, and they're mentored through that process. And in doing so, they're kind of learning essentially their bedside manner, the way that they convey things. And I think in the astrology community, it could be very helpful to see different methods of conveying the chart, different ways that you're able to interface with people, and that kind of professionalism and hourly or amount of hours. So this is my Capricorn stellium talking. So resources, having those kind of times, those hours, those ways that people convey. I think that's how the two can really learn for each other. And I think in this Pluto and Aquarius era, it's a new humanitarian way to understand how we kind of can build this community. And this is one of the ways.
Yeah, thank you so much. You explained it so well. And at the same time, I like that Capricorn reference as my 9,000 Capricorn. And I was going to also comment on something. Yeah, I have a question for you, and I will ask this question to Mia and Melina as well. So when you choose your therapist and your astrologer, for example, what things you consider? What are your criteria for these things?
Yeah. First of all, I'd say that for me, choosing a therapist or psychologist is kind of like dating. You go on a first date and you see if you get along, if you vibe, And I've had first dates that just left a horrible taste in my mouth, and I said, never again will I see this person. For me, I think it's very important that the therapist or counselor I see has a spiritual practice of their own. I don't need to know what the details of that are, but I need them to understand that there is the spirit, the acknowledgement of spirit. For me, again, as a Capricorn sun with all the Capricorn, I need them to be at a certain level intellectual. I think very common because like an earlier someone said, or was it, sorry, Frida said, she was talking about earlier how seeing 8 clients a day is a ridiculous load for people who are psychiatrists. So for me, I've seen therapists who, when I'm talking to them, their eyes are glazed over, they're checked out, they're burned out. And with COVID in the situation, so sometimes I think that for me is active listening and responsiveness in our conversation, or am I just another client? Am I being seen, heard, felt in a certain way? That's very important for me. So yeah, I don't want to talk too much, but that's for me.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. All right. So any comments, any questions, anybody? Or Nick?
I'd just like to add that it's very very interesting how his experience with all of that, you know, psychology and tarot and astrology, it just enriches his perspective on things and helped him, you know, to navigate through difficult times and also discover the best in him. And it is like that, you know. I agree with the first day theory. Now I also go through therapy, so it's just a matter of experience, you know, just feeling it and going with whatever your gut feeling tells you to do whenever you're, you know, seeking help, because you have to feel comfortable with whomever you're talking with, you know, and that is a part of it, you know. I also have to keep, you know, 8 patients every day, and it's so draining it can be, and I fight over it, you know. I reduced the number of patients. I fought it. I just really don't care if that gets me into trouble, because quality over quantity, always, always. So thanks, Nick, for sharing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and thank you for the work you do. I wanted to say, when you speak the calmness in your voice and speaking about work that men need to do, I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, both of you. And Melina was raising her hand.
Yes, I want to say that I agree with Nick. I have changed 3 therapists. For me, the most important is to understand that I am not the tough person that I want to show that I am. Both of my previous therapists were saying, yeah, you're fine, you don't need anything, and stuff like that. And they were making me talk very generally. So I wasn't going deep in my problems and issues. And I was giving the impression that everything was okay. So my last therapist was making me questions, but making me wondering and looking into myself. And I felt that she was understanding me. So that's the most important for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I can feel that as well.
Yeah, and also concerning the astrology, I started the 3rd session after having a transit of the North Node over, you know, conjuncting my Mercury in Aries. And Mercury is the Lord of my natal chart. So right now I feel that this is taking me somewhere.
Yeah. And you are here
Yeah,
at the
of
same
course.
time. Yeah, perfect.
It's, you know, it's the attempt that makes me want to try this
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, exactly. You will speak up and speak up better, definitely.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right. So any comments, any questions for so far for Nick? No. Okay. So we will also refer to his topics that he mentioned. And now we can go on with Mia. So Mia can talk about herself and her experience with therapy and astrology and how he chooses the profession, how she chooses the professionals. And yeah, it's up to you. You can just talk about anything you would like to add.
Yeah, so I'm Mia. I'm 34 years old. I was born in Romania, but currently I'm living in France. I'm studying astrology for, I've been studying astrology for 2 years now. So I'm a future baby astrologer. And also numerology, a specific method of numerology that comes from Russia. I think I got my diploma in the few days.
Yeah.
Coming.
Congratulations.
I think my world changed a little bit when during my Saturn return. It was a difficult period for me at that time. I was a bit lost. I knew I couldn't hide anymore. I became like the adult I'm supposed to become when Saturn comes. I started, but the therapy, I think I started it during my Scorpio moon, progress moon. When I remember, I just talked to my astrologer at that time. I called her and I asked her what is happening, because I was so like, it was like an emotional roller coaster. And she just said, it's just your Scorpio moon. Okay. For how long? 6 months. Okay. So I need another 6 months with this roller coaster. And I think it was that period of time when I started therapy. I have a bit of difficulty in choosing my therapist, because I didn't know what to choose, what method would suit me best. So I took a reading with an astrologer that now is my teacher, and I decided to go for a therapist that is that also do massages and body, or that is somatic. My Virgo moon wanted that somatic part. I also experienced other type of therapy because I was in need of answers in my life. So I did parapsychology, shiatsu, akashic records. I did like everything. And one day I was on Instagram, and there was that therapist from Romania. She invented a method. Basically, it's family constellation and internal family systems. And it was mind-blowing for me. It helped me a lot. Oh, I see that Melina knows the method.
Yeah, I do the same system.
I mean, for me, this information should be public knowledge, because I realized that many of us in this life are in the child position. So it's difficult to have a healthy, thriving life
Exactly.
when you are like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's something very nice. It helps me understand what's going on around me and why everything happens. So it helps me forgive, which is the most important thing in order to move on in your life. You don't have to have someone in your life, but you have to forgive him so you can go on. So it helps me understand.
And then I went back to my birth chart and I saw that I have Chiron in the 4th house in Cancer. Yeah, that it's conjuncting my Mercury and maybe my Sun. And I was like, okay, so that transgenerational trauma, someone needs to deal with that. So that's me, I suppose. That is also opposing my Neptune, Saturn, and Uranus, I think, in the 10th house. So like, oh my God, so much work to do now. And then I had Lilith in Libra in the 7th house. I'm like, oh my God, okay. So yeah, it is still overwhelming to deal with all this information. But it's getting better and better. And astrology helped me because I needed answers and I needed to know, okay, I have this problem. How can I solve it? And what is the cause? How can I explain it? For me, it's very important to understand that. And numerology and astrology help me a lot. So now I want to offer also, I want to be a good astrologer, numerologist, and using also the family system constellations method.
Yeah, I'm sure like you will synthesize all of your experience and knowledge and come up with something unique. So with all the professional areas that you've focused on so far. So yeah, it's also great that you are here and share that with us. So would you like to add anything, Mia?
I don't know if people have any questions.
Yeah, and people, so I can have people's questions if they have any.
I try to summarize
Yeah, Daniel.
information.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was also born in 1989, Mia, so I know a little bit what you're talking about. That Chiron is also conjunct Jupiter, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know in your chart.
Yeah, the thing is, I think, sorry for that.
It's
I
okay.
think Jupiter is on my IC in Gemini, and I think I couldn't see all the problems that I had in childhood because Jupiter brought this amazing energy, joyous, big family, laughter and stuff. So I couldn't see the small stuff that I considered insignificant, but it shaped me a lot and affected me a lot as a child. So basically,
Yes.
Jupiter was a great benefic for me.
It's a great benefic when it comes to healing too, you know. Yeah, that's awesome. But I wanted to ask you if you plan to integrate both astrology and numerology, because there are lots of numbers on charts, right? The degrees, and there's also the degree theory in astrology. So I wanted to know what you think about it.
Yeah, what I like the most is the karmic astrology, from my experience, because I need that depth that the karmic astrology can offer. I also sometimes do some reading, but I'm a baby astrologer, so I don't have much knowledge at the moment. But I realize that when I look at a person birth chart, I can see I can have some knowledge and I can interpret it. But the method of numerology that I'm still learning is very complementary. So it helps me see things that I can't see in the birth chart. I don't know if I can't see them because I don't have the knowledge yet, or maybe because I'm not supposed to see all these things. I can't see, just astrology doesn't allow me to see
the details your moon in Virgo wants you to see.
So now I can see with the numerology that I can see things that the birth chart can't offer me, and it's very, very interesting. For example, a practical example, one of my I have a friend whose mother she has schizophrenia. So I learned about these pathologies with my teacher, and I can see that easily in a numerology chart. I don't know if I can see it easily in a birth chart, but with the numerology, it was spot on. So I think it's great that in 2024 people are so open to this kind of unconventional methods, and they can merge and mix them, because this woman, she's medicating, okay, but she has such a great potential. She's very creative, but she's only medicating, and I think now she's in a hospital. Basically, no one is helping her. Medicating is not helping. And it makes me sad, because if someone with a good knowledge and open the mindedness and conventional methods could help her. and I want to offer this type of session to people that need them.
That's very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Mia. All right. So any comments or remarks or on Mia, what she has talked about so far? No. Okay.
Only that
Yeah.
real quick,
Nick.
Mia, you've inspired me now to go through my birth chart with numerology. So just thank you for that, because
Yeah.
yeah, through the
Just to
tarot,
say-
I learned numerology and I apply it in the cards. But I don't know why until this moment, but never thought of applying numerology to my birth chart. So thank you.
Actually, I followed you on Instagram, and the numerology method I'm learning is based on the 22 arcanas of tarot.
Beautiful. There we go.
So,
okay. Well, I'll DM you if I have questions then.
Okay.
Just to pop in, there's a couple of different ways to learn the numerology. I learned Chris Witecki's step system, which goes from 0 to 11, and each represents a planet and a feeling. So 0 is Scorpio, I protect. 1 is the sun, I love, and so forth. So for example, my sun's at 24 degrees Scorpio. So 2 is I feel, 4 is I belong, and 6 is a Libran degree of I receive. So there's different ways to do it, but the numbers when I'm doing readings, they're always spot on. It helps. It's a layer to the chart, right? So if someone's got a Gemini sun at 0, there's a Scorpio layer to that sun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How do you
exactly.
spell Pateki? What was it, Lauren? You said Chris
I'll
Pateki?
put it in the chat. I'll put service name just and his name in the chat. That's easier for everyone.
Okay, thank you. All right, so if there are no any other comments or questions, last but not least, let's move on to Mia, and she will also talk about her experience for astrology and psychology, and like she has already talked about it in question sessions, but now it's your turn, Melina. Sorry.
Sorry, yes, I was
Yeah.
on mute.
Yeah.
So, yes, what I have realized is that when you look into your natal chart, you can find, many things, and it has helped me, as Mia told, to my therapies. For example, I have an Aries stellium. I have Mercury, Mars, and Sun in Aries, so I can't think before I talk. And this is giving me an anxiety attachment style. I want to do things, right now, immediately. And then I have Moon opposite Neptune, which makes me confused all the time. And after find those things out, I found the specific points that I have to work. My anxiety, my delusional thoughts, because I am a very moon person. On full moons, because I have moon in Cancer, so it's. I think that I want to change that. Moon in Cancer, opposite Uranus and Neptune. It's very difficult for me. I'm becoming delusional during full moons, new moons, whatever. So that has helped me a lot to calm down myself, because I'm having, moon readings, and I know when is the full moon and stuff like that. So that helps me to calm down a lot. And it's kind of like a placebo for some people, but for me it works. And for example, I have Chiron opposite Saturn. I have things with my father, but that happened after a transit. So I forgave him, and I'm learning how to live with this thing, and I'm trying to erase this trauma by combining astrology and psychology. So I'm trying to keep a balance. I don't focus on astrology or psychology, but I feel that it helps a lot to combine it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the whole point of the session you just summarized. Yeah. Thank you so much. And also, like when you having therapy sessions, so did you ever bring up the topics in your natal chart indirectly to your therapist? Like, for example, I have problems with my father and this type of things.
No, because I started again for 3 months ago, and before that I wasn't into astrology so
I see.
deeply, and but it was a different type of therapy before. I was having hypnosis for 1 year, which was a short-term therapy, but very focused.
Yeah.
And the second time that I had therapy was a fail. It didn't work for me. So for now, I'm starting to finding my steps. I don't know if the therapist is into astrology because we get to know each other. So I will see.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
For
you
the
so much.
moment, I have found my method, so it works well for me right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point. Finding what works best for you. Yeah. And glad that you have found it. Thank you. And Jaymie raises her hand. Jaymie?
Yes, Melina, I have a question I kind of wanted to add to what Matt was saying. He asked if you had brought up like things that you found in your chart, like, like challenges with your father, and you mentioned that you hadn't done that it's based on like the timeline, but with stuff that you know now are challenges that are like that both within your own like personal life that also show up in your chart. If you um if you were to do like therapy again, is that something that you would want to bring up? Would you feel comfortable with it? Like, how do you feel about bringing up the astrology? And would you just share the topic, or would you also include like based on my birth chart, da 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 da? Like, how would you like navigate that, or what feels comfortable for you?
I feel I have brought things like this. For example, the relationship with my father is a thing, but I haven't discussed how I have explained this to myself.
Is it something you want to do, or are you kind of like, how do you feel about it?
I don't know yet because we don't know each other very, very well. And I believe that we can share this stuff with people that understand us. We don't have to change the perception of people around us. If you don't believe in astrology, okay, it's your problem. I do, and I don't care. I'm not going to push you. I will use everything for myself. So I don't know yet her perception on this, but yes, I discuss things, and I feel like I'm one step ahead. I'm a very good student for her. It's funny because we discuss something, and then I know that there is a full moon that affects me a lot, so I act on something that we discussed, and then I go back next week and I'm like, oh yes, and I did what we discussed, but I know that it was just a good time with a good transit for me. So she might think that I have a very big EQ, a very high EQ.
No,
Yeah.
yeah. it's interesting to hear like you and then like Nick and how you guys kind of have that perspective. I love how you were saying like, you know what, it like if they don't believe in it, that's their problem. So you're there to really get like the maximum quality and benefits based on like, okay, like this is the situation. Okay, what can I leverage from it? Or that's the perspective that I see. And I feel like my mindset is actually similar to Nick, where he said that like he wants to know that you acknowledge spirituality, that you have your own spiritual practice. I know for you, Nick, you were saying that the details aren't important. Uh, And I never really thought about it too much about whether the details are important to me or not, but I'm very much like as a therapy client patient, I always want to know that as well. And things are different now that I'm an adult, but when I was younger, like I ran away from home when I was 12, and my mom, there was a lot of like also like mystical stuff and psychic attacks. So I didn't start being honest about things in my life until I was an adult, and because I wanted to make sure when I was younger, I was like, I don't want to get institutionalized for the things that I say. And then as I got older, I was very much like, hey, these are the things that I believe in, and I want to know what your take is on this because, I don't want to be misdiagnosed as being schizophrenic or something. And the therapist is very much like, it's one of those, like, you need to read between the lines because legally I can't say shit. And they're like, I want you to know I'm very, very open-minded. I won't judge you. They were like, it's not a part of therapy, but they're like, I have a lot of personal interests that, allow me to support you. They're very much like in code with stuff like that. So for me, it was interesting to kind of hear the different dynamics. So thank you.
I'm coming from a family that is very spiritually. For example, my mom has the second degree of Reiki. My brother, who is 19, is reading cards. So I have worked a lot with it, and I don't have the urge to spread it. If someone has an interest, I'm happy to discuss it, like now. But I don't feel like that I have to change people's mindset.
Yeah, exactly. There's billions of people in the world. It's like I feel like we can find the people that are compatible.
Yes, exactly.
I think also for me, like it's my hard-earned money, and I get to depend. Well, I pay out of pocket, so that might be part of it. But it's my hard-earned money. I should decide who I work with. And as I maybe individuated outside of my family system, it was like I can decide who I want to work with in a way that works for me, rather than maybe feel not only a family pressure, but maybe a societal pressure to choose a certain type of practitioner or healer. And I think maybe what we're all talking about right now is having the ability to do so, whether that be somatics, family system, astrology, tarot readers. We get to choose, and that's the beauty of it all. So.
And you're the one that grew up in San Francisco, right? Because I grew up in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So.
I grew up in Richmond. I grew up in the East Bay. Also I live in Oregon right now, but I've been all up and down the West Coast. And so that's, well, it's funny because that's my Mercury line. So I'm on my Mercury line, astrocartography. So I might be ready to get off it soon, but it's working for me now.
Very cool. Oh, you're on your Mercury line in Oregon?
Yeah, well, pretty much from Vancouver all the way to the Bay Area is my Mercury line, astrocartography. So yeah.
Nice. Okay. Very cool. Yeah, no, you were saying things. And I was like, oh yeah, I resonate with that. I grew up in San Francisco in the Richmond District, Sunset, Ingleside, and now I live in LA. So, and it's so interesting because I feel like being American, I was over here thinking like, oh my God, like our healthcare, our system is just trash and stuff. And then I listen to like the therapists in other countries and like just even like my friends, and I'm just like, oh wow, like I know so many people who have like given up their license in their country and then do it in the US, and I'm just like, oh my God, I was like, are we the better? I'm like, that's terrible. I'm like, we need a change in the world. But I think we did grow up in an environment that was inherently a little bit more open-minded, which I think it's a blessing.
I mean, for me growing up where I did, there's strengths and weaknesses. I didn't travel to Europe until I was in my mid-30s. It blew my mind when I did, and I'm going back. But I think that's a whole nother conversation. But so Bay Area, strengths and weaknesses, hippie movement, all the things that happened. It brought up a lot of good, useful things that have happened, but it also has challenged in a lot of ways things that are still happening. But that's a whole nother Zoom.
Yeah, we could definitely get down a rabbit hole conversation on that for sure.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Thank you,
Yeah,
everyone.
exactly.
I unfortunately have to go, but thank you, everyone.
We will end the session like in a bit. So let's do roundups and close-ups. So thank you so much for being here. Like it has been 3.5 hours. Like it felt like an hour for me. Like it didn't feel that long. We talked a lot. Like I enjoyed it a lot. Like I knew that it was going to be good, but not that good. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being here, and thank you for making my project real. So and thank you, Daniel, for inspiring me. And all of your input and insight are very valuable. And I think I will upload the video in 3 parts or something like that. So it might be too long for YouTube. And I will also notify you, and I will also kind of tag your accounts on YouTube. So if people want to reach out to you. So yeah, thank you so much, and for being here. Thank you for your time. And now I'm going to stop the recording. And I think this connection, like we will keep connected. So we made good connections today. So see you next time, let's say. Okay. Would you like to add anything, everybody, before you go? Okay, goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.